Lumé was truly beautiful and alluring, delicious and delectable. It was just. Xiao Ran winced slightly. His side effects hadn't completely worn off yet. But what about Lumé? She had already passed out. What to do? Click. Just then, the door actually opened. It was Shinua. With a triumphant look, she said, "This is my house. You think I don't have a spare key?" It was just that her memory had always been poor, and she'd spent a long time looking for the key just now. Then, she saw the two people on the bed, and her pretty face instantly turned as red as fire. Sorry. She quickly turned to run. But after 2 steps, she stopped and actually turned back. Shinua bit her lip. "Can you take me and Mei with you?" Huh? Xiao Ran wasn't in a hurry. The side effects were no longer surging. Anyway. He smiled. "On what grounds?" Shinua, stomp her foot. "The food stored here is only enough for me to eat for about a month. When it's gone, I'll just have to wait to die. If I follow you, I can at least survive." Xiao Ran was astonished. "Didn't you curse me out completely before?" "That's because I didn't understand you at all," Shinua said. "Besides, as someone who has never been in contact with an Esper, do you think I should have immediately accepted the fact that you flew here from Sioux City in a whoosh? I suspect your logic isn't very normal. What if you were really a bad person? I have to be responsible for myself and Mei. Fine, that reason was somewhat reasonable, but I'm Lumé's man. You're trying to dig at her wall? Aren't you afraid your good sister will turn on you?" Xiao Ran said. Shinua, however, was remarkably nonchalant. Are there still laws and morals these days? Besides, if humanity can survive this wave of disaster, the most important thing will be to reproduce and strengthen the population. Even among lion prides, male lions have to fight to gain mating rights, because only the most outstanding genes deserve to be passed down. You're so powerful and so outstanding. In such a special period, isn't it normal to have a few more women? Yo, your thinking is excellent. I quite admire it. However, it's not a few more women, but many. There are some whose names I can't even fucking remember. Xiao Ran still smiled as he looked at her. Well said, but why should I take you? Shinua seemed a little ticked off. She spread her arms and spun around, then pointed to her own face. Look at my figure, look at my face. What part of me can't be called a top-tier beauty? Xiao Ran smiled. First, you're not as pretty as Lumé. Just by a tiny bit. Rounding up, we're the same, Shinua said with incredible thick-skinnedness. Don't be fooled by her soft, sweet-sounding voice, which made her seem like a soft, cute girl. It didn't match her personality at all. Xiao Ran was unmoved. Second, your chest is too small. You don't get it. What's so good about them being too big? It's uncomfortable to even walk. Isn't Mei's shoulders sore from her straps every day? Shinua argued plausibly. Besides, Ibi isn't small. What? Are you a breast man? You guessed it. Xiao Ran admitted frankly. But just like Mei, I've never had a boyfriend before. Shinua said. Xiao Ran said leisurely. You're only AB. I have a soft and cute voice, and I can be sweet or savory. Shinua was still trying hard to sell herself. Xiao Ran remained leisurely. You're only AB. Xiao Ran. Even a clay figure has some temper. Is your brain only filled with those few ounces of flesh? Shinua said angrily. Xiao Ran was still leisurely. Lumé has more than just a few ounces of flesh. At least 2 pounds. What the fuck? Shinua was stewing in a pot of resentment. Whether in school or at work, she had always been the publicly acknowledged goddess. Who would ever dislike her for having a small chest? Besides, a B-cup couldn't be considered small, right? You shallow guy. Xiao Ran, just give me a straight answer. Are you taking me or not? She said fiercely. Xiao Ran smiled, finally dropping the leisurely act. Shinua now hated that expression to death, and said, Why don't you ask your good sister? Huh? Shinua looked at Lumé in a daze, only to see that Lumé had woken up at some point and was looking at her with astonishment, full of disbelief. Obviously, Lumé had heard her long speech. That damn man, he didn't even mention that Mei was awake. But the ugly daughter-in-law must eventually meet the parents-in-law. This was bound to happen anyway. Mei, you're awake. She was quite composed. We're good sisters. You wouldn't just watch me die, would you? Lumé was still staring at her blankly, the surprise in her eyes growing stronger. Do you even know what you're saying? Is this how sisterly affection is used? If I said I mind, would you back down? She said faintly. No. Shinua shook her head very honestly. Xiao Ran is my only hope of survival. Besides, he's so capable. I won't be wronged by following him. No, this isn't about whether you're wronged or not. It's about whether I agree. Lumé frowned. You. Xiao Ran isn't the only outstanding man in the world. But I don't have time to wait. Shinua walked over. Lumé decisively turned hostile and hurried to block her. The two women instantly started grappling with each other. However, how could a yoga practitioner beat a gym goer? Shinua was truly full of contrasts. She was tall with long legs, but her voice was soft and cute. She could be sharp-tongued, yet she was also passionate and unrestrained. Xiao Ran was a bit speechless with her. If you were to get married, could you stay faithful at home? Hee, definitely not, Shinua said. I come from a rich and powerful family. My family not only has money, but also influence. However, I'm the older sister, and I have a younger brother. Not only will the family fortune be inherited by my brother, but I'm also meant to be used in a marriage alliance to help consolidate my family's position in the business world. This shelter was a piece of land my family specifically used their connections to get approved for me, just to appease me, and they spent a few $100 million to build it. They wanted me to marry someone. Actually, the guy wasn't bad-looking. After all, he was a descendant of a wealthy family of the same level. The genes were there. But this kind of marriage alliance is so annoying. I decided long ago that after the wedding, we'd each do our own thing. He could have mistresses 3, 4, and 5, and I would find lovers 6, 7, and 8. We'd stay out of each other's hair. In public, we put on a show of affection, but behind the scenes, I didn't expect the apocalypse to come. You, my fated enemy, are enough to satisfy me all by yourself. I don't need to find other men anymore. Xiao Ran's worldview was somewhat shattered. He had only become a bit wealthy in the 3 months before the apocalypse, accumulating a total of over 3 billion, but that was nothing in front of a truly wealthy family. The time was also too short. Even if he could be considered wealthy, he couldn't understand the so-called life of the rich and powerful. Are all wealthy families this chaotic? 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, one more time. After several one more times, even the gym-goer Shinua was completely out of strength and fell into a deep sleep. Xiao Ran got out of bed, got dressed, and poured himself a glass of Wanglaji to drink. The next step was definitely to bring Lumé and Shinua back to Qingfeng Garden and have them start evolving as well. However, this time he didn't plan to wait another 10 days. He would go directly to Haidu. Damn it, there was a bunch of Japs there. Are the Espers and Haidu all shit-eaters? Don't they know to unite and wipe out this group of little devils first? Infighting is fine, but the premise is to eliminate the external enemy first. Look at the Three Kingdoms period. Wei, Shu, and Wu fought in a chaotic mess, but didn't they still beat the foreign enemies into submission? When killing the little Japs, you don't need to care about right or wrong at all. Damn it, I'll kill them on sight. It's a perfect way to strengthen my power. He would return to Qingfeng Garden now, then go to Haidu tomorrow. There was no time to lose. Nowadays, a single major battle between Esper factions could create a terrifyingly powerful expert. This kind of snowballing accumulation was astonishing, so now that he knew, he had to go quickly. Anyway, he had a satellite phone to stay in contact, and with his speed, it wouldn't take long to make a trip back to Qingfeng Garden. Yes, that's the plan. He took out the hovercraft, swapped the two women onto it with his space ability, made sure they were warm, and then started the hovercraft towards Qingfeng Garden. The speed of the hovercraft was no match for his own travel speed, but there was no choice. He couldn't just carry the two women and run against the cold wind. They would become ice sculptures in a few minutes. Slow was slow. It was only about 160 kilometers, and there was no traffic now. As long as he didn't go in the wrong direction, it would be fine. A little over 4 hours later, the familiar snow plains of Taihu Lake appeared before his eyes. Xiao Ran smiled faintly, steered the craft onto Taihu Lake, and continued forward. He went up the mountain, arrived at Qingfeng Garden, and parked the craft at the door. He directly swapped the 3 of them into the house. This skill was really high class. A thumbs up. With their man back, the women were naturally happy, but when they saw that Xiao Ran had brought back 2 more beauties, they couldn't help but feel a little jealous again. But what could they do? In this day and age, let alone 3 or 4 wives, what about 72 concubines? In the apocalypse, men were the main force for finding supplies and the power to protect their families. The attrition rate was very high. If one could investigate, the ratio would definitely be more women than men, just like in wartime, and the ratio would be astounding. Therefore, one man with multiple women had become a natural allocation. The difference was that now there were many women, but not many beauties, and top-tier ones were even rarer. They were either hiding somewhere or would have been monopolized by some powerful figure, becoming caged birds with no freedom. In comparison, their lives were practically heaven. Xiao Ran once again announced his decision to go to Haidu. Because he had already announced it once, and was originally supposed to leave today, but was delayed by Lumé's call. The women no longer felt the panic and unease they had when they first heard the news yesterday. But Xiao Ran was their backbone. When he was around, it was fine, even if he was away from home for a few days. Knowing he was in Sioux City gave them a sense of security, and they wouldn't panic. But now Xiao Ran was going to another city. They felt incredibly dejected. A night passed. Su Qingmei and the other women hadn't gotten up yet, but the pair of sisters, Lumé and Tu Shinua, came downstairs first. They seemed to have reached an agreement and were no longer arguing. Could it be they formed some kind of alliance to deal with the other women together? Xiao Ran just smiled, with no intention of dissuading them. The more this kind of competition, the better. Get ready for breakfast, he said. Soon, Su Qingmei and the other women also got up one by one and came to the dining room. Lumé and Tu Shinua were very calm at first, but they soon started to panic. How could this be? How could there be so many top-tier beauties here? The likes of Su Qingmei and Jiang Yuankai were in no way inferior to them, and each had her own unique characteristics. Some were charming, some pure, some cool and aloof, some capable, and there was even a pair of sisters. And one beauty was so stunning she outshone them all, so beautiful they couldn't find a single flaw. They were like vegetables hit by a snowstorm, immediately wilting, their morale low. Xiao Ran called the women to eat. After they finished, he had Lumé and Tu Shinua begin their evolution, while he himself set off for Haidu. This trip had to be made. Xiao Ran really wanted to just hole up at home, because he truly had no ambition or desire to dominate the world. However, the battles between espers were too cruel. It was destined that he could not stay peacefully in one place. Then let the battle begin. He was confident that with the abilities he now possessed, if not invincible, he could at least protect himself without a problem. Amidst the reluctant farewells of the women, Xiao Ran embarked on his journey to Haidu. Actually, he had also considered whether to go pick up Lu Susu, but Lu Susu was in Jiangxi province and in a rural area at that. Even if he knew the address, and even with the spatial sense, it would be very difficult to find her. In comparison, the Japs in Haidu were a higher priority. Lu Susu would have to be put aside for now. Xiao Ran unleashed his speed, running wildly towards Haidu. At high speed, the cold wind hitting his face was also very painful, especially with the current temperature so low, around -50°C. It was truly like a knife, cutting his face raw. But that was for ordinary people. Xiao Ran felt almost nothing, and after sufficient activity, his whole body was steaming. A white pillar of air formed above his head. Much like the 3 flowers gathering at the crown, 5 Qis returning to the origin of a martial arts master. Exhilarating. Xiao Ran's spirits soared, and he ran faster and faster, like a flash of lightning. And with the detection of his spatial sense, no matter how fast he ran, it was impossible for him to step into a ditch, nor did he have to worry about crashing into any buildings. His speed was maintained at an astonishing 200 kilometers per hour, comparable to a high-speed train, just not quite a bullet train. What if he could continue to strengthen himself, absorbing another 10,000 or even 100,000 portions of abilities? He could probably be faster than an airplane, maybe even surpass a fighter jet. In less than an hour, Xiao Ran had almost arrived. It was incredibly empty. Even though this was once the busiest city in the country, it had now completely returned to silence. There were no birds in the sky, no human tracks on the ground, only a vast snowfield, and then rows of tall buildings standing there, like bamboo shoots after spring rain sprouting from the soil. Xiao Ran slowed down, returning to a normal walk. Due to the intense exercise, he was breathing out hot air, which even had a burning sensation. If measured with a temperature gun, this hot air might even be 60 or 70 degrees. Xiao Ran felt he was truly no longer human. Since the air he exhaled had such a high temperature, what about inside his body? Under intense activity, his whole person seemed to have become an engine, with extreme temperatures possibly exceeding 100 degrees and a heart rate of 300 or more. Yet, he was completely fine. Am I even a fucking carbon-based life form anymore? Xiao Ran thought of those espers who could transform into metal. People could temporarily turn into metal, and with overuse of their ability, they would permanently solidify in a metallic state. How could that possibly be considered a carbon-based life form? So, I'm not that much of a freak yet. Xiao Ran continued walking. He found people. His spatial sense could cover a radius of more than 7 kilometers. What kind of concept was that? He walked over his speed fast. Chongbei Middle School. A young man was hiding with 5 students. Not far away, 3 people in Jap-style clothing were searching, and one of the Japs entered the room where the students were hiding. What hiding places could there be in a classroom? The young man and the 5 students were just standing behind a few chairs, almost visible at a glance. But a strange thing happened. The Jap clearly looked over with his eyes, yet he saw nothing and walked out of the classroom again. A bit interesting, Xiao Ran said. Soon, the 3 Japs gathered together again. Didn't find them. Damn it, that Chinaman's ability is too annoying. They must still be in the school. Then keep searching, we must find them. I don't believe they can last for many days without food or water. That's right, one of the female students was specifically requested by Master Matsushita. After cursing in Japanese for a while, the 3 split up again to search. Xiao Ran nodded. The young man's ability was to create illusions or perhaps deceive the eyes. Although this ability had no offensive power, its effect was actually quite impressive. But what if I looked through something like a camera? Would it still work? Xiao Ran smiled and decisively walked over. He strolled into the school and walked straight toward the young man and the 5 students. Even if the young man's ability was really to create illusions, at most it could only deceive the human eye. But Xiao Ran was now viewing through his spatial sense. No illusion could affect him. Coincidentally, although Xiao Ran made no effort to hide his tracks, none of the 3 Japs happened to run into him. Thus, Xiao Ran smoothly arrived at that classroom, the one where the young man and the 5 students were hiding. His gaze swept over it, and he saw that the classroom was empty. However, the image fed back by his spatial sense in his mind was completely different. Interesting, very interesting. He had clearly absorbed over 7,000 portions of abilities, yet his eyes were still deceived, which showed how potent this illusion was. This young man wasn't actually strong. The number of abilities he had absorbed was definitely in the single digits, and his physical enhancement was extremely limited. Otherwise, he wouldn't have to be hiding from those few Japs outside. Brotherly mean. That person seems to be staring right at us, a student said with a trembling voice. Yeah, why is he always staring at us? He's smiling. Oh God, can he hear us talking? They were all trembling with fear. The person standing at the classroom door really seemed to be able to see them. Otherwise, for someone to stare at an empty classroom and even smile, how damaged must his brain be? Moreover, they also mistook Xiao Ran for a devil. Although Xiao Ran's appearance and dress didn't look like it at all, the young man gritted his teeth and said, I'll go take him out. You guys follow me. The confusion space I create is only 2 cubic meters. If you get too far away, you'll be exposed. Okay, the 5 students all nodded. The young man quietly crept toward Xiao Ran, a fruit knife now in his hand. As he moved, the 5 students followed, all huddling behind him. Xiao Ran deliberately didn't look at them, still staring at their original position. Could this person really have a mental problem? Never mind. He's a little devil. Kill him. The young man had already reached Xiao Ran's left side, quietly bringing the knife over, about to slit Xiao Ran's throat. Just then, Xiao Ran finally spoke. He even turned his head to look at the young man. Are you playing hide-and-seek with me? You can see me? You can also hear me speak? The young man was startled, almost dropping the knife. Yeah, Xiao Ran smiled. Then aren't you fucking messing with me? The young man was angry, but he also felt a strange sense of security, because Xiao Ran's attitude and appearance didn't seem like those of the Japs. The Japs nowadays were ferocious, no longer pretending, their brutal nature fully exposed, killing without batting an eye, as if it were 70 years ago. Are you Chinese? But the young man still asked for confirmation. The genuine article, Xiao Ran smiled. If you dare say I'm a Jap, I'll fucking beat you to death. The young man, on the contrary, became happy. You can see through my illusion, so you must be an esper too. Great, let's escort these 5 students out together. We can't let them fall into the hands of the devils. Before Xiao Ran could speak, one of the Japs was searching his way over again. The young man reacted extremely quickly. As soon as he heard the footsteps, he used his ability to envelop Xiao Ran as well. This time, even without using his spatial sense, Xiao Ran could see the young man and the 5 students. The 5 students became nervous again, and even the young man's expression was grim, clutching the fruit knife, ready to fight for his life at any moment. Xiao Ran, however, was quite leisurely. He asked, with an ability like yours, you could have easily escorted them out. Why are you still hiding? The young man gave a bitter smile. You make it sound so simple. First, activating this ability is very draining, and the longest I can maintain it is no more than 10 minutes. Second, it's a snowy landscape outside. After we walk past, won't we leave footprints on the ground? That makes sense. Xiao Ran was just making small talk and continued. What's your name? And how did you end up here? What do you plan to settle these 5 students? The young man was stunned. There was an enemy not far away, and you still have the mood to discuss this with me? Are you just too carefree, with no sense of danger at all? No, that can't be. Are there any fools who have survived until now? Could it be? He looked at Xiao Ran with shining eyes, full of expectation, and said, My name is Sun Limin. I used to be a Daigo. This time, I happened to be in Haidu to see a friend when the disaster struck. I was trapped in a hotel and almost died, but then I actually awakened an ability. I managed to get by for many days and only arrived here a few days ago. I happened to see those Japs searching the school for survivors. I fucking hate devils the most, so I saved these 5 students. I wasn't fast enough, so the few little devils saw us and have been watching us ever since, trying to wait until we're so hungry and thirsty that we have to run out on our own. I plan to send them to the Jung-an gathering area. I heard the management there is composed of retired soldiers, and the order is the best of all the gathering areas in Haidu. If they go there, as long as they're not lazy and are willing to work, they definitely won't starve to death. He seemed to trust Xiao Ran immensely all of a sudden, speaking from the heart without any reservation. Xiao Ran's interest grew even more. How many factions are there in Haidu right now? Sun Limin was about to cry. Big bro, my ability is almost depleted. Can we talk about this some other time? Xiao Ran was completely unconcerned. If your ability runs out, it runs out. What's the big deal? That devil, big bro, can you handle him? Sun Limin asked cautiously. Yeah, no problem. I should be 1,000,000,000 points stronger than him, Xiao Ran said casually. Oh, Sun Limin calculated in his head. Since Xiao Ran was a little stronger than this little devil, then with his help, it would be a sure win. Even if the sound of fighting alerted the other 2 devils, it was possible to finish this one before they arrived. They would be 2 on 2, and they wouldn't necessarily lose. If they could then take out the remaining 2 devils, they would have plenty of time to escape. Okay, it's feasible. I'll count to 3, then I'll drop the ability, and we'll attack together, Sun Limin said, looking at Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran nodded. All right, 1, 2, 3, attack. Sun Limin abruptly dropped his ability and swung the fruit knife towards the little devil. However, he wasn't a physical type. The enhancement of his body was just a side effect, and he hadn't enhanced it many times. The strike was indeed fast and fierce, but only relative to an ordinary person. The little devil was first startled, then immediately came to his senses. He sneered, and his entire body was covered in a thick layer of scales. A beast type. Once he used his ability, his physical qualities would skyrocket, making him no less formidable than a physical type. Moreover, he would have additional advantages like sharp teeth, sharp claws, and thick scaly armor, which in this respect made him more comprehensive than a physical type. The little devil just casually blocked, his eyes full of contempt. You're not a physical type, and you dare to stab me with a knife? Fool! Baka! With a clang, the fruit knife struck the devil's arm. Sparks flew, and not a single one of the little devil's scales fell off, but Sun Limin felt a sharp pain in the webbing of his thumb, unable to hold the knife handle any longer, and it slipped from his hand. At that moment, the little devil showed him a cruel smile. Shine! He swung his hand at Sun Limin, his 5 fingers as sharp as knives. My life is over. Sun Limin subconsciously was about to close his eyes when he saw a fist fly towards the little devil. Quan actually made a crisp sound, and then the little devil was sent flying sideways. Xiao Ran had made his move. Hiss, what powerful strength. Are you a physical type? Xiao Ran, however, shook his hand. The head of this beast-stiffied little devil was really hard. It made his hand ache a bit. And this guy wasn't dead yet. Baka, the little devil got up, shaking his head. He was a bit dizzy, but his defense had also soared after his transformation. A punch like that hadn't killed him, but for some reason, the world was spinning quite badly. Sun Limin and the 6 others stared at the little devil in shock, because the left half of his face had completely collapsed. Beaten in by a Xiao Ran single punch. What kind of terrifying power was this? Nanny! Swish swish. 2 figures also rushed over quickly. It was the other 2 little devils. They first looked at their companion, and seeing that half his face had been caved in, they couldn't help but be horrified. What kind of divine power was this? They knew that this companion was a beast type, with great strength and high defense. These were his characteristics, yet he was still beaten like this, which meant that the attacker must have crushed him in terms of strength. How many abilities had this companion absorbed? About 20. Therefore, his opponent had to be a physical type who had absorbed at least 30 or even 40 portions of abilities. Then, they looked at Xiao Ran. There was no need to look at Sun Limin. They already understood him well. This person's ability was to create illusions to deceive their five senses. So, since a new physical type had appeared, it could only be this man. Chinaman? One of the little devils said in a strange accent. Xiao Ran looked annoyed. If you can't speak Chinese, then don't. Fucking making our language sound so weird. I hate it the most. He went up and delivered a kick. The two little devils naturally wouldn't let him kick them. They were about to release their abilities to counter. But before the abilities could be activated, they found that their thoughts could no longer be sent out. Bang! Xiao Ran kicked one little devil, who exploded. Another kick, and the other little devil also exploded. How could a non-physical type withstand his strength? Besides, he hadn't even used his full strength when he hit the beast-type little devil earlier. However, with two little devils dead, he could only rely on the last one to provide information. He just didn't know if his head being smashed and would affect his intelligence. It would be fun if he turned into an idiot. Sun Lumé and the six others had their mouths wide open, staring at Xiao Ran as if he were a monster. Bro, you're too damn fierce. Xiao Ran smiled amiably at the last little devil and said, I'll ask, you'll answer. Otherwise, those two will be your example. Understand? At #UN ##, the little devil opened his mouth and spoke in his bird language. Slap. Xiao Ran smacked him on the head. Speak human. You can't even fucking speak human. The little devil looked aggrieved, but mostly scared. #UN #. Damn it. Xiao Ran looked annoyed. Did he really break the little devil's brain? Bro, is it possible? He doesn't know our language. Sun Lumé said cautiously from the side. Bang! Xiao Ran was furious. With a kick, the little devil was sent flying sideways, and then he didn't move again. He wasn't kicked to death but killed by spatial cutting. Can't speak Chinese. What are you doing in China? Tui, he muttered resentfully. Sun Lumé and the six others looked at Xiao Ran with awe and shock. What a fierce man. Bro, what's your name? I admire you so much. Sun Lumé's eyes were shining. He had guessed before that Xiao Ran was an expert, but he never imagined that Xiao Ran would be this fierce. He purely admired the strong. However, among the five students, the three girls each had their own little plans. What kind of world was this now? Not only had social order collapsed, but there were also a large number of little devils here. How cruel were the little devils? Just think about the atrocities these beasts committed during the War of Resistance. Although the crisis was temporarily resolved, what about the future? They had only the strength to truss a chicken. How could they survive in such a world? Sell their bodies? It wasn't impossible, but if they sold themselves to many people, they could only make a living, and it would be too tiring. But what if they only sold themselves to one strong man? They could eat and drink well, and maybe even hold power. This was a chaotic era. The power one held now was much greater than before. It could even decide the life and death of others. Thinking of this, the three girls' hearts couldn't help but pound. Opportunity, this was an opportunity. Big brother, my name is Lin Xiao Xiao. You can call me Xiao Xiao. The prettiest of the three girls immediately smiled sweetly. Even in such a situation, the two male students still stared with wide eyes. My name is Lu Tian. My name is Meng Xian. You can call me Xin Xin. The other two girls also quickly introduced themselves, then sent electric gazes toward Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran was a bit amazed. These five were all high school students, right? Are high school students these days so fierce? Moreover, one look at the three girls, and you could tell they had bad intentions. Sorry, I'm not interested in you. Although Lin Xiao Xiao was the prettiest of the three, and was indeed tall with long legs, quite the beautiful young girl, her looks were only at the level of Zhang Jingya or Zhonglei. Although she had the advantage of youth, she was long past being a virgin. None of the three were. In fact, you could tell from their enthusiastic and direct behavior. They were no strangers to men. Otherwise, their expressions should have been shy. They were tender, but only in age. As for their bodies, their flower paths have been swept by who knows how many fated guests. Bro's not interested. Xiao Ran looked at Sun Lumé and asked, I asked you earlier how many factions there are in Haidu. You haven't answered me yet. Sun Lumé was taken aback for a moment, then said, as far as I know, there are 6 major factions in Haidu. Jung-an Gathering Area, Hwasong Gathering Area, Buyuan Gathering Area, Biyun Gathering Area, Taolin Gathering Area, and finally, the Japs Black Dragon Society. Xiao Ran nodded. Who are the leaders of these 6 factions, and what is their strength? Sun Lumé gave a bitter smile. Bro, I'm just a nobody. I live a hand-to-mouth existence myself. How would I know so much? That's true. Xiao Ran smiled and said, all right, I'll go with you to the Jung-an Gathering Area. Great. Sun Lumé was overjoyed. With Xiao Ran along, how much safer would it be? However, The three girls, like Lin Xiao, were a little unhappy. We're talking to you nicely. Why are you being so aloof? Damn it. If this wasn't the apocalypse, I'd write a little essay about you, have everyone condemn you, and make you kneel and beg for mercy. But what could I do now? Each of them tried their best to smile, showing their most beautiful side to Xiao Ran. However, Xiao Ran still pretended not to see. To be honest, he really couldn't be bothered to escort these 5 students. Why should he? He hadn't turned into some kind of saint. Other people's lives had nothing to do with him. On the contrary, if anyone were to drag him down, he wouldn't care who it was and would just kick them away. The reason he agreed to escort them with Sun Lumé was mainly to use this identity to blend into the Jung-an gathering area and take a look. Sun Lumé didn't know the strength of the 6 major gathering areas. But would no one in the Jung-an gathering area know? In war, the most important thing is to know yourself and your enemy to be victorious in every battle. As the ancestors said, otherwise, have him escort these 3 scheming girls plus 2 sycophantic dogs? The 7 of them set off, with Sun Lumé leading the way. Xiao Ran, meanwhile, opened a space gate behind him and used spatial swapping to put the 3 devils' bodies into his alternate space. Silently, these 3 girls were a no-go. He had absolutely no interest, so he didn't want any side effects right now. Xiao Ran had no intention of revealing his true strength. In the eyes of Sun Lumé and the 6 others, he was a physical type, so he would be a physical type. It had to be said, Haidu had too many landmarks. Even if the road signs were buried in snow, it didn't matter. As long as you were familiar with Haidu, you could naturally determine the direction by the numerous landmark buildings. In this respect, Sun Lumé was not very good. On the contrary, the 5 students, being natives, were very familiar with the whole city. When they learned their destination was near the South Railway Station, they took over and pointed the way. Xiao Ran actually knew every street clearly. The road signs underneath could block others, but not his spatial sense. However, he found that although they were not on the optimal route, they were still heading in the right direction, so he said nothing and just followed silently. The straight-line distance from their location to the South Railway Station was only a mere 6 kilometers, and now they could basically walk in a straight line. The rivers were frozen and covered with snow, so there was no need to detour to find a bridge. But the snowy road was difficult to walk on. The 5 students were still ordinary people. After walking for 10 minutes or so, they couldn't go on and had to go inside to take shelter. Otherwise, breathing in too much air at tens of degrees below zero would freeze their lungs, which would then shatter. They walked and stopped and walked. The 6-kilometer journey took a full 4 hours before they finally arrived at the South Station. The railway tracks were naturally long gone. Only the waiting hall still stood above the snow, and only a small part of it. But the Jung-an gathering area was not here. They still had to walk another 2 kilometers. But the sky was getting dark, and soon a thick fog would descend. At that time, you wouldn't be able to see your hand in front of your face. Forget about going to the Jung-an gathering area. Even the 7 of them would get separated. Xiao Ran, of course, was not included. So they went to find a place to stay for the night. They found a hotel that actually had a stove with a gas canister, and more importantly, it still had gas. They lit the fire, then dismantled furniture to burn for warmth. Xiao Ran deliberately went out for a while, saying he was going to find some food nearby. A dozen minutes later, he returned to the hotel just as the fog was setting in and threw some instant noodles and biscuits to Sun Lumé for him to distribute. Sun Lumé was overjoyed. Bro, thanks to you. We haven't had a full meal in days. They've been trapped in the school, with the little devils constantly searching for them, so they didn't even dare to go to the cafeteria to find food. Fortunately, Sun Lumé had collected some food before, all in his backpack. Otherwise, they would have starved to death. Even so, they could only eat a few biscuits a day, barely staying alive. Sun Lumé went to distribute the food, giving the largest portion to Xiao Ran. No need. I've already eaten, Xiao Ran said. He certainly wouldn't eat this kind of food. He had indeed eaten before. It was simple, a steaming bowl of beef noodle soup, cooked by Wong Lulu. The broth was very fresh, made from authentic beef bones, and the beef slices were not as thin as those in a certain ramen chain, which would fly away with a single breath. The 6 of them were already eating with hot water. Although the food had been frozen and thawed, and tasted terrible, having something to eat now was good enough. What more could they ask for? Each of them wolfed it down. After eating, Xiao Ran called Sun Lumé over and continued to ask about the situation in Haidu. At least this guy had been here for over 100 days. Sun Lumé naturally answered everything he knew without holding back. Finally, he said, Bro, I still don't know your name. Is that so? Xiao Ran thought for a moment and couldn't help but chuckle. My name is Xiao Ran, with the Ran for Burn. Nice to meet you, brother Xiao. It's a pleasure, Sun Lumé said with a look of adoration. You're so strong. Gain a little fanboy. Xiao Ran naturally wouldn't easily trust Sun Lumé. However, the other party's ability was useless against him, and he always had his spatial sense active, so there was no way Sun Lumé could be speaking in front of him while actually sneaking behind him to stab him. To take a step back, with Sun Lumé's current physical condition, even if he were given a knife to stab Xiao Ran, he probably couldn't even break his defense. It was just that Sun Lumé's knowledge of Haidu was very limited. Although he had been wandering around this city, he had always been at the bottom and had only a very superficial understanding of the various Esper factions. Xiao Ran didn't mind. He could reach the Jung-an gathering area tomorrow. Get some rest, Xiao Ran said. They chose a large suite. Xiao Ran had one room. Sun Lumé and the two male students had another, and the three girls slept in another room. In the living room, furniture was burning, providing a meager amount of heat, at least enough to prevent people from freezing to death in their sleep. These were extraordinary times, so Xiao Ran kept his spatial sense active even while sleeping. Safety first. When away from home, he trusted no one but himself. In a flash, 2 hours passed. The corners of Xiao Ran's mouth couldn't help but curve up. As expected, Lin Xiao pushed open the door and looked back, nodding at the other two girls. Tonight, they had to take down Xiao Ran. The three girls quietly crept in. Their target was Xiao Ran on the bed. If Xiao Ran hadn't been certain they were just ordinary people, he might have thought they had ill intentions, perhaps attempting an assassination. No, they did have ill intentions, just not to kill him, but to eat chicken tonight. For Xiao Ran, this was not auspicious at all. He suddenly turned on his flashlight. The glaring beam of light made the three girls instinctively close their eyes and shield them with their hands. What are you doing in my room in the middle of the night? He asked faintly. Can't sleep? Lin Xiao was slightly disappointed. If Xiao Ran had been asleep, she could have just squeezed onto the bed. Then, in a matter of minutes, her delicate hands would tame the dragon. Once he had a taste of her, could he still deny it? He wouldn't want to. Now, she had to resort to her coquettish skills. Big brother Xiao, you saved us. We want to repay you, Lin Xiao said, feigning shyness. Xiao Ran just chuckled dryly. This is in ancient times. Are you really pulling the repaying with my body routine? But money is useless now, and we have nothing else, only our bodies, Lin Xiao continued, still acting incredibly shy, her big eyes misty, as if she were about to cry. TSK, your green tea skills are lacking, too contrived. Xiao Ran commented in his mind, while smiling. So, you plan to sleep with me? Don't put it so crudely. Lin Xiao sneered her heart. What did this person do before? Did he even graduate from junior high? Why does he talk with such a tone? But what could she do? In this day and age, you have to rely on espers to survive, and Xiao Ran was a cut above Sun Lumé. So if she had to cling to a strong person to survive, who to choose was a simple decision. Besides, Sun Lumé said that even after reaching the Jung-an gathering area, they would have to be self-reliant. She was so delicate and so beautiful, long accustomed to using her looks to earn pocket money and bribe teachers to change her grades, making her an honor student every year. Now you want her to be self-reliant. She couldn't do it, and she couldn't endure the hardship. Therefore, she had to latch onto Xiao Ran's thigh. Yes, we all greatly admire Big Brother Xiao, so. Her cheeks flushed red, her acting skills quite impressive. Xiao Ran, however, said faintly, fine. If someone's offering themselves to me to play with, I have no reason to push them away. And it's even a threesome. But let's just play. Don't come crying to me tomorrow, saying I have to be responsible or anything. Let me be clear up front. I've always just been playing around. After he finished speaking, the faces of Lin Xiao and the other two girls turned pale simultaneously. Fucking scumbag. Come on. Xiao Ran patted the edge of the bed with a mocking smile. Lin Xiao forced a smile and said, Big brother Xiao, you must be joking. How could you be that kind of person? You could try me. See if I'm not ruthless after I'm done, Xiao Ran said faintly, his face full of the roguish air of a playboy. In fact, he wouldn't want these three women even if they were offered on a platter. At such a young age, who knows how many men they had been with. He wasn't that desperate for food yet. Lin Xiao and the other two girls looked at each other, their faces showing resistance. Forget it. Getting screwed for no benefit. And the key was that it was too cold now. Even just taking off their pants would be freezing. Otherwise, they hadn't done it in many days and wouldn't mind just getting some pleasure. Big brother Xiao, we were just joking with you. Lin Xiao said quickly. It's late, you should get some sleep. Yes, yes, big brother Xiao, you should sleep. We're going back. The three girls retreated, returning to their room in defeat. Xiao Ran scoffed, lay down on the bed, and went back to sleep. His physique was so astonishing now that even without a fire in the room, he wasn't cold at all. It was fine even if he fell asleep. He wouldn't even catch a cold. But he still pulled a blanket over himself, his thoughts inevitably turning to the women at home. Those were the real top-tier ones. If he wasn't so lazy, he could run back to Sioux City right now, meet the women, express his feelings, and even sleep with them again before coming back. It had only been the first day. No need to act like he hadn't seen a woman in 3 years. A night passed. When he woke up in the morning, Xiao Ran deliberately didn't go out to collect food. Lin Xiao and the other 4 students were hungry, but they didn't dare to blame Xiao Ran for anything. To order an esper around? Although they were spoiled, they weren't that stupid. Let's go. They hit the road, continuing towards the Jung-an gathering area. The 2-kilometer journey took over an hour. The main reason was that the snow was too difficult to walk on, so slippery it was hard to stand, and the cold wind was so fierce it made them dizzy, forcing them to stop and go. At last, they finally arrived. The Jung-an gathering area was built on the foundation of a residential complex called Jung-an Community. It had now been converted into a settlement. The snow inside the complex had been cleared, so you could spot the place from nearby. It was very conspicuous, completely out of sync with the surrounding environment. There were guards at the gate and patrols around, some even with dogs. Before Xiao Ran's group of 7 even reached the gate, the dogs started barking and lunging, appearing very vigilant. A dog's nose is much more sensitive than a human's. In this special period where high-tech equipment was almost all paralyzed, using dogs as patrol guards was quite effective. At the gatehouse, 2 men with guns immediately looked over. They had their guns in hand, but they weren't aimed at them. They shouted from a distance, "Who are you? State your identity quickly, or we will open fire." In these times, everyone was on edge, their vigilance extremely high. Sun Limin immediately said, "My name is Sun Limin, and this is Big Brother Xiao Ran. We are espers, escorting 5 students here." "Wait a moment," one of the guards said, picking up a radio to contact someone inside. Xiao Ran didn't speak, appearing nonchalant, but his spatial sense was open, and he had a clear understanding of the entire gathering area. The leader here should be a short-haired man around 30 years old, not tall, about 175 cm. But even when sitting alone, his back was ramrod straight, and his eyes were bright, flashing with a determined light. Very strong. If he wasn't a physical type, he should have absorbed around 4,000 portions of abilities. If he was a physical type, that would be sharply reduced to 400. The difference was not small at all. Xiao Ran thought he must be the leader because there was a guard standing at his door, also as straight as a pine tree. However, the gate guard was contacting someone else. After receiving the message, that person came out of a residential building, thinly dressed, yet unafraid of the severe cold, and strode to the gate. "You can come over," this person said. Xiao Ran's group of 7 walked over. The gate opened, allowing them to pass. "It's cold outside. Let's go inside and sit down first," this person said very amiably, leading Xiao Ran's group into a residential building. He introduced himself. "My name is Wong Tai. I'm considered a small leader here. You could just call me Brother Wong. What's the situation with you all?" Sun Limin was quick-tongued and explained the origins of their group clearly. Of course, his knowledge of Xiao Ran was limited to his name and the fact that he was a physical-type esper. He naturally knew nothing else and couldn't say much. Wong Tai, however, stood up, gave him a military salute, and said solemnly, "You are both heroes for rescuing our compatriots from the Japs." Xiao Ran was curious. "Brother Wong, were you a soldier?" "I was, but I'm retired," Wong Tai said. "In fact, most of the leaders here are retired soldiers. We came together because of shared ideals and established this gathering area. We firmly believe that the power of the state cannot be destroyed by such a natural disaster. It will surely reappear, and then our people and our country will surely rise again." Soldiers were different, full of passion, loyal to the country, and filled with confidence. Xiao Ran's thoughts were a bit more pessimistic and dark. If it were a purely natural disaster, he would absolutely believe in the power of the state to sweep away all evil and restore order. But with the existence of espers, it was completely different. When an individual's power could rival an entire army, the army lost much of its meaning. And reality was moving in that direction. It was the general trend. But this was their belief, and he certainly wouldn't deliberately poke at it. So he said nothing. "Rest assured, we will take in these 5 students, Wong Tai said, patting his chest. Are you two willing to join us? However, I'll be blunt. Here, espers are treated the same as ordinary people, eating and living together without any special privileges. Moreover, we have to bear the responsibility of finding energy and strategic materials. Ordinary people also need to work, taking care of our plantation. Sun Lumé was stunned. There's a plantation here? It's so cold. What plants can survive? Wong Tai laughed heartily. We dug a large space underground where the temperature is high enough. There's just one problem. It's too humid down there. People can't stay there for too long, or their bodies can't take it. Otherwise, we would have all planned to move down there. Sun Lumé still found it hard to accept. There's no sunlight underground. How do you grow vegetables? There must be a related esper, Xiao Ran interjected. He had seen this before with Qin Sui. Something like an artificial sun. Smart. Wong Tai gave Xiao Ran a thumbs up. You two join us. Let's preserve the spark for our country and for humanity. Sun Lumé was still young. His blood immediately rushed to his head, and he shouted, I agree. Xiao Ran, of course, couldn't agree. He smiled. I like to wander around. I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint Brother Wong. Wong Tai was indeed very disappointed, but he also knew that it was very, very difficult to keep espers here. Look at the treatment they offered. Other factions would practically crown their espers as kings. Here, they were made to eat and live with ordinary people, with the exact same treatment. How could they retain any espers? But on the other hand, despite this, there were still 26 espers here. Xiao Ran could only say, the faith of soldiers was truly as strong as iron and steel, indestructible, not even by the cruel reality of today. Big brother Xiao, why don't you stay too? There's safety in numbers. Sun Lumé, surprisingly, tried to persuade him back. Xiao Ran chuckled, but didn't pay him any mind. Instead, he looked at Wong Tai. Brother Wong, do you have any information on the Japs? Wong Tai was stunned for a moment, then his eyes lit up. You want to ambush them? Xiao Ran didn't deny it. Killing devils now doesn't count as damaging the friendship between our two countries, right? It doesn't, haha, of course not. Wong Tai laughed loudly, his face full of admiration, the previous disappointment gone. Those Japs are truly despicable, searching everywhere for our people to capture and force to evolve. Once successful, they are killed for their abilities. Beautiful women are raped and tortured until they are on the verge of death before being made to evolve. If it weren't for the large number of civilians here, I would have fought them to the death long ago. Xiao Ran nodded and said, but you guys are quite impressive to be able to resist the Japs with so few espers. Wong Tai's expression turned grim. I'm not trying to boost the morale of those little Japs, but those devils are particularly ruthless, even to themselves. They had their entire population evolve right at the beginning of the apocalypse. Damn, they're a bunch of lunatics and perverts. Nearly 400,000 people, they just started evolving all at once. Over 300,000 died, but they also gained over 300 espers at a very early stage. With this force, they became the undisputed #1 power in Haidu. The remaining 5 major factions can only resist them by joining forces. Brother Xiao, you saying we can resist these little Japs on our own? You're really thinking too highly of us. By the end, he gave 3 bitter smiles. So it was the 5 major factions combined that could resist the Japs. Xiao Ran nodded. He had thought any one of the 5 factions could stand against them. Actually, this was reasonable. Who let those devils have a head start? And they were ruthless enough to have everyone start evolving right away, resulting in over 300,000 deaths. Just as Wong Tai said, ruthless and perverted enough. Wong Tai continued, actually, even with our 5 factions united, we can only barely resist. Those little Japs send people over to harass us every now and then. If it's a small-scale attack, we can handle it ourselves. If many espers come, we need help from our allies. Fortunately, the major factions are all clear on this point. They know they must unite, or they will be eliminated one by the Japs. That's how we've maintained the current situation. He frowned, looking worried. The Japs were putting a lot of pressure on him. Xiao Ran smiled. Then I have even more reason to go ambush the little Japs. Brother Wong, tell me the information you have. If Xiao Ran had asked for information on the leaders of the 5 Chinese factions, Wong Tai would definitely be suspicious and would not have revealed it. But the Japs were different. He said, the leader of the Japs is named Shiri. He's a beast type. After transforming, his strength, defense, and speed are all incredibly terrifying. He also studied swordsmanship before, so he's skilled at fighting with a sword, and his attack power is extremely astonishing. Shiri has 2 deputies. One is named Sakura Ko, a woman, who is an ice attribute esper. When fighting outdoors, it's her home ground, and her strength should not be underestimated. The other deputy is named Ozawa Taro. His ability is curses. You must never let him get anything from your body, not even a single hair or a bit of skin. He can use it to cast a curse, and you could be cursed to death without even seeing his face. He's the most difficult to guard against. These three are the Japs' three strongest combatants. Wong Tai spoke animatedly. Below Odashiri's trio are his personally appointed 10 warlords. Although there's some difference in strength, it's not too significant. However, according to our intelligence, at least half of the warlords have disappeared, and we don't know where they've gone. They've gone to surrounding cities to grind and level up. Xiao Ran thought to himself. Duan Chong must have been one of the so-called 10 warlords. He had killed his way from Kuan City to Su City and even insidiously killed Qin Sui, eating his fill in one go. Fortunately, Xiao Ran had killed him in time. What a fucking traitor who acknowledged a thief as his father and aided a tyrant in his oppression. A perfectly good Chinese citizen, yet he chose to acknowledge the Japs as his father. No, that's not right. Duan Chong's betrayal didn't start after the apocalypse. He had already betrayed the country when he was working at the company. For people who only have eyes for profit, you talk to them about patriotism? Whoever offers more benefits is their father. Xiao Ran nodded and continued to ask for information on the so-called 10 warlords. Wong Tai told him one by one. They had been fighting these Japs for over 3 months. At first, they could only engage in guerrilla warfare and couldn't confront them head-on. Later, as the number of espers grew and the 5 major factions were formed, they finally managed to gain a firm foothold. After all, this was China. Although there were about 400,000 Japs in Haidu, how many Chinese were there? Over 20 million. If they could initiate a full-scale evolution, even with a 1 in 1,000 success rate, Haidu would have 20,000 espers. 20,000 against 300. Wouldn't that be a crushing victory? Brother Xiao, it's great that you have the will to kill the enemy, but you must also be mindful of your own safety, Wong Tai said solemnly. These Japs have gone crazy. If they see Chinese people, they kill espers on sight and capture ordinary people for forced evolution. You must be extremely careful not to get yourself killed just for taking out a few little devils. Xiao Ran smiled and nodded. I understand. I'll definitely be careful. Wong Tai wanted to persuade him further. With such a resolve to kill Japs, why not stay here? At least everyone could look out for each other. Just then, an alarm sounded. Not good. The little devils are attacking. Wong Tai stood up immediately. They had several types of alarms here, and this one was used when devils were spotted. Sun Limin immediately rubbed his hands together. Good timing. I'm going to kill some little devils today. Wong Tai led Xiao Ran and the other man out, while saying to Sun Limin, your ability can have an excellent support effect on the battlefield. You'll follow me later. I'll find 2 snipers, and then it'll be a shooting them, and they won't even know where we are. Okay, Sun Limin agreed at once. Brother Xiao, it looks like your first battle will be here, Wong Tai said again. Xiao Ran laughed heartily. As long as they're devils, what's the difference where we fight? Well said. Let's go. Wong Tai led the 2 to the main gate. All the espers in the gathering area had also run out. Most of the ordinary people had hidden, but a few had taken up suitable sniping positions in the residential buildings, setting up their guns. Sakura Keiko, Wong Tai blurted out, his gaze fixed on the woman leading a group of people at the community gate. Wu Shanlong. The invading Japs numbered 50 people, led by a woman in her 20s. Although she was less than 6 meters tall, her figure was very well proportioned. If not for the others nearby, for comparison, you could say she was 7 meters tall. A well-proportioned figure, a beautiful face, and she was wearing a kimono with wooden geta on her feet and thick white socks, not at all looking like she was in the severe cold. All one could say was, espers were just that willful. Hand over 50 people, and I will leave immediately with my men, this Sakura girl said in broken Chinese. Wu Shanlong was the boss of the Jung-an gathering area, and Xiao Ran hadn't guessed wrong. It was that 175 centimeters middle-aged man who sat ramrod straight. He scoffed and said, in your dreams, Wu Shanlong, how many people do you have now? Can you afford such attrition? Sakura Keiko was still trying to persuade him. Why insist on this for some ordinary people? Our boss greatly admires you. As long as you surrender to us, our boss can make you the second in command of our Black Dragon Society. Xiao Ran's eyebrows twitched. There was a Black Dragon Society more than 70 years ago. Now the Japs were up to their old tricks, creating another one. Just from this name, one could see the Sima Zhao's heart of the little devils. Wu Shanglong just glanced askance at the woman and still scoffed. If you want to fight, then fight. What's with all the nonsense? He was clearly a hot-tempered person and charged out directly. Boom! His whole body turned into a ball of fire, as if equipped with some kind of booster. He suddenly soared into the air and flew towards the group of Japs. He was really flying. A fire user should be considered a mage, but Wu Shanglong had none of the awareness of a fragile mage hiding behind others and throwing fireballs. Instead, he rushed into the crowd of Japs like a meteorite. Quick, spread out! Sakura Ko shouted loudly while waving her hands, and an incredibly thick ice shield instantly formed in front of her. Bang! Wu Shanglong crashed into it. The ice shield was immediately melted by the blazing flames all over his body, but this block gave the group of Japs time to scatter and flee. Sakura Ko let out an angry shout. Half of her body immediately turned into ice, her skin even becoming transparent, allowing one to vaguely see what was behind, though the light was refracted layer by layer, making the view blurry. Wu Shanglong, you refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. Sakura Ko began to fight with Wu Shanglong. One ice, one fire, a perfect counter to each other. Their strengths were about the same. You freeze, I melt. You're cold, I'm hot. The fight was fierce. Brothers, kill these little devils. Wong Tai also roared and pulled Sun Limin along. His ability was to give kinetic energy to objects, so he acted as a sniper. When an ordinary bullet was enhanced by his ability, its speed could reach Mach 5. With the same mass, how many times more destructive is a Mach 5 bullet compared to a normal one? 25 times. This was enough to pose a threat to most espers. Instantly, a chaotic battle broke out. Xiao Ran opened his spatial sense, taking in everything in his mind. He didn't rush to make a move. Instead, whenever someone on Wu Shanglong's side was in danger, he would intervene with spatial cutting, spatial swapping, and other abilities. As a result, there was no possibility of anyone on Wu Shanglong's side getting injured, while the people Sakura Ko brought began to be injured and even killed one after another. After losing more than 10 people, the morale on that side plummeted, and everyone was afraid to fight. Sakura Ko had no choice but to say, retreat, retreat, retreat. As the saying goes, don't pursue a desperate enemy. But Wu Shanglong's hot temper clearly preferred to pursue the routed foe with whatever remains of your courage. He chased after them, causing Sakura Ko's side to suffer 3 more deaths before he finally stopped the pursuit. With the signal to withdraw, everyone's morale was boiling, and they roared continuously. This battle was fought beautifully. Only Sun Limin was searching everywhere. Where was Xiao Ran? Why was Big Brother Xiao gone? Xiao Ran was leaping across rooftops. He could now jump over 100 meters in a single leap, so moving across rooftops was no problem at all. And for the occasional time he couldn't make it, wasn't there spatial swapping to fall back on? He watched Wu Shanglong stop and turn back, but he still didn't make a move, following Sakura Ko's group for another 2 kilometers. Sakura Ko stopped. She counted the remaining number of people and was both furious and shocked. She had brought 52 people, and now only 36 were left. Damn it, this is too damn it. They often fought fierce battles with the 5 major factions, and while casualties were inevitable, not only did both sides suffer losses, but never had it been as severe as today. 16 dead in one go. They only had a little over 300 people in total. If 16 died every day, they would all be wiped out in less than a month. How could this happen? Sakura Ko couldn't accept it. Wu Shanglong was just so on par with her in strength, and he hadn't suddenly become stronger. The others hadn't made much progress either. There was that one annoying sniper who was hard to spot, but that was it. This couldn't have fundamentally changed the tide of battle. Where did the problem lie? Sakura Ko was completely baffled. Let's go back first, she said. The boss will be furious. The group of little devils shivered. Otashiri's ferocity frightened even his own people. Actually, you don't need to worry at all, Xiao Ran's voice suddenly rang out, and he walked out from a building next to the Japs. A person appearing out of nowhere, and the Japs had just been pursued and were like frightened birds. Someone immediately lost their nerve and turned to run. But after 2 steps, they realized something was wrong. Not only had only 2 teammates run with them, but Sakura Ko was standing her ground, motionless. The 3 of them sheepishly walked back, their expressions awkward. Slap, slap, slap. Sakura Ko first slapped each of the 3 across the face and said fiercely, if this were in the past, I would have you commit seppuku. Yes, the 3 little devils all lowered their heads. Anyway, they didn't have to commit seppuku now, so they weren't afraid. Only then did Sakura Keiko look at Xiao Ran, sizing him up before saying faintly, "Who are you? I've never seen you before." She knew all of Haidu's 5 major leaders, plus their top generals, crystal clear. This person was definitely not among them. But for this person to come before them all by himself, what did that imply? He was incredibly strong. Otherwise, how could he be so confident? Sakura Keiko would not underestimate any Esper. People with that kind of thinking usually died early. But not only had she survived, she had also become a number 3 or even number 2 figure among the Japs, where male chauvinism was deeply ingrained, which showed how cautious she was. Xiao Ran smiled faintly. "My surname is Chao. All right, I won't posture with you. A bunch of devils, there's absolutely no need." He hadn't acted directly at the Jung-an gathering area because he didn't want to expose his strength. After eliminating the devils, it was conceivable that internal conflict would be inevitable. And there were still satellites in the sky, especially with so many Espers now, with all sorts of diverse abilities. Maybe someone could see everything through a satellite? Although he had appeared before Sakura Keiko and the others now, he was undercover and hadn't exposed his appearance. It was always better to be careful. He currently held over 500 uses of spatial swapping, and there were only a little over 30 Japs in front of him. Even using spatial swapping 10 times on each person would be more than enough. Besides, he had the even more powerful spatial domain. "Let's finish them all at once," he said to himself. "What's the point of posturing with little devils? A dead little devil is a good little devil." Domain, activate. Instantly, 29 of the 37 Japs were enveloped by the domain. It was just that 37 people couldn't possibly be crowded together, so there were still 8 people outside the domain. Xiao Ran didn't mind. With a thought, spatial swapping was activated. 1, 2, 3. The 8 people outside the domain immediately appeared within it. This scene naturally greatly alarmed Sakura Keiko and the others. What kind of ability is this? How can he move people out of thin air? If he throws someone into the air, won't they just fall to their death? What if he throws them into a volcano? They were all shocked, looking at Xiao Ran with deep apprehension. "This Chinaman must die. Cut him down," everyone shouted, all attacking without waiting for Sakura Keiko's command. In an instant, dozens of abilities flew towards Xiao Ran simultaneously. "In here, I'm a god," Xiao Ran said faintly. As his voice fell, all the incoming attacks, be they fireballs, ice arrows, sound waves, or blade attacks, all came to a bizarre halt. However, although he had put on a show, Xiao Ran found that forcibly stopping a large number of attacks drastically increased his ability consumption. I won't put on this kind of show anymore. It's not safe." Then, the Japs all discovered that their bodies could no longer move either. How is this possible? He's just one person. The Japs shivered, their eyes filled with fear. If it were a head-on fight, then dying in battle was just that. They had dared to undergo a full-scale evolution in the early days of the apocalypse, which showed they had considerable courage and were quite perverse. But the scene before them was too bizarre. The Japs were like that. If you were weaker than them, or just slightly stronger, they would try every means to kill you and take everything you had. But when you surpassed them by countless times, making them only able to look up to you, then even if you stepped on their faces and called them dogs, they would accept it gladly. Just like their American daddy. 2 bombs were dropped, and didn't the Japs obediently call them daddy? Now, Xiao Ran's power made them despair. Their will to fight was instantly gone, and they only wanted to call him daddy. Bang! Sakura Keiko had already transformed into an ice snow state. Suddenly, her entire body shattered into countless ice fragments. Then, at least 200 meters away, outside the domain, her body reappeared, condensing from the ice and snow, then transforming back to the skin tone of a human body. She escaped the domain through this method. But while a person could escape like this, clothes couldn't. So, she was now stark naked. Xiao Ran was a bit surprised. As Espers grew stronger, all sorts of life-saving methods really started to appear. With a thought from him, poof, the 36 Japs within the domain were turned into cellular-level fragments at the same time, completely invisible to the naked eye. What's more, within the domain, Xiao Ran could prevent a single fragment from touching him, because this was his world, and he was its master. He reached out his hand, and a black sphere appeared in front of him. This was the 36 Japs, or rather, the material that composed them. With a thought, the space gate opened, and he pulled the black sphere inside. He didn't want any side effects right now. Then, he looked towards the sole survivor. 200 meters away, Sakura Keiko couldn't help but shiver. This Chinaman's face was expressionless, his gaze filled with a cold light, as if she weren't a person at all, but a corpse. Keiko Sakurada was filled with apprehension. Xiao Ran's move just now was too terrifying. 36 people, all of them espers. How could they all have been killed in an instant? In fact, she could also kill those 36 people instantly. When one's esper power was overwhelmingly superior, it was a one-sided slaughter. However, Xiao Ran's ability was too bizarre, so bizarre that she still didn't know what kind of esper power it was. Killing people with fire, ice, or earth spikes was all traceable. But what was this move? For a moment, she even felt that she too would die. "Who are you?" Keiko Sakurada asked in a deep voice. Xiao Ran, however, was quite surprised. He had clearly opened his domain, yet this woman had managed to escape? Indeed, a domain was not banishment. It didn't form an independent space. As long as he didn't actively prevent it, even ordinary people could enter and exit freely, as if the domain didn't exist. The problem was, he had already sealed the domain space. No entry, no exit. Yet Keiko Sakurada still ran. TSK, TSK. As expected of one of the 3 leaders of the Black Dragon Society. One could imagine, if even Keiko Sakurada was this powerful, what about Oda Shiri, the leader? How much stronger would he be? He could not be underestimated, truly could not be underestimated. A Chinese man, Xiao Ran said in a deep voice, killing intent overflowing from his eyes. Keiko Sakurada, however, started laughing. "So, you're an angry youth. You Chinese, history is in the past. That part of the past is already more than 70 years ago. Why dwell on it? We all live on the same earth. Why not get along?" She was curious about Xiao Ran's identity and apprehensive about his strength. She had to figure out why such a mysterious, unknown, and powerful figure had suddenly appeared in Haidu. The Black Dragon Society and the 5 major factions had currently reached a delicate balance. A slight addition of external force could break this balance. Therefore, one Xiao Ran alone was of no concern, but if he joined the camp of the 5 major factions, it would be a bit troublesome. It could even disrupt their plans. Xiao Ran clasped his hands behind his back and leisurely approached Keiko Sakurada. It seemed casual, but activating his esper power didn't require his hands. It was a matter of a single thought. "Let it go." He laughed heartily as if he had heard the biggest joke in the world. "Letting go of hatred is for our ancestors. What I have to do is send you to meet your ancestors." Back then, 35 million soldiers and civilians were killed or wounded. Yet from your mouth, it becomes a casual "let it go." "Fine. I, your father, swear right here that I will go to your tiny island nation, and regardless of gender, age, or morality, I will wipe your filthy race from the face of the earth. Anyway, in another 70 years, someone will just say it's history, and we can just let it go." After this speech, Keiko Sakurada's expression naturally turned extremely ugly. Although she didn't believe for a second that Xiao Ran had such an ability, when someone points at your nose and says they're going to wipe out your country and your entire race, how could you not be angry? But anger was one thing. Keiko Sakurada became even calmer. Xiao Ran only spoke of hatred, but revealed no information about his own identity, rendering her probing ineffective. She continued to provoke him. "Great ambitions, but you don't even dare to say your name?" It wasn't that he didn't dare, it was just unnecessary. Besides, they had a curse-type esper. Although Wong Tai said this person needed something from the target's body to cast a curse, would an enemy reveal all their trump cards to you? What if Ozawa Taro could cast a curse using a name? Maybe he just hadn't used it, or maybe it was a newly acquired ability. Both were possible. An idea struck Xiao Ran, and he said, "A true man never changes his name. I am Chao Shining." He looked magnanimous. Keiko Sakurada inwardly noted this with a series of cold sneers. It was true that Ozawa Taro couldn't curse a target through a name, but they did have an esper who could locate a target by name. If there were others with the same name, they would all be sensed. It was quite magical. She wasn't confident she could kill Xiao Ran, but as long as she knew his name, she could pinpoint his location. Then, if she and Oda Shiri acted together, couldn't they kill this Chao Shining? "Mr. Chao, a pleasure to meet you." Keiko Sakurada smiled, but before the smile faded from her face, she had already waved her hands repeatedly. Boom, 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 at least dozens of ice spikes shot out from the ground. Xiao Ran didn't even dodge? Keiko Sakurada was stunned. Was this seemingly difficult opponent dealt with so easily? Wait, no. She saw that although her ice spikes had pierced Xiao Ran's body, the guy seemed like a phantom, completely unharmed. The next moment, bang, 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 all the ice spikes shattered. Xiao Ran had used 2 abilities in succession. banishment on himself, and then spatial compression on the ice spikes. Why not use the spatial domain? Within the domain, what attack could possibly harm him? The logic was sound, but opening the domain consumed too much Esper power. If he could achieve the same effect with less power, why waste more? With a thought, Xiao Ran opened a spatial gate. Whoosh, 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 hundreds of sonic speed steel bars shot towards Keiko Sakurada. Ding, 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 ding. The steel bars hit, only to be blocked by a thick ice shield that had appeared in front of Keiko Sakurada. Because the elements didn't counter each other, the steel bars only embedded themselves in the ice, making it look like a hedgehog, but they couldn't break through it. However, this was just a diversion from Xiao Ran. He had swapped positions with one of the steel bars, bringing himself within 100 meters of Keiko Sakurada. A pebble was tossed out. Spatial exchange. The next moment, Keiko Sakurada, who was still behind the ice shield, bizarrely appeared in mid-air, though only 3 meters off the ground. She was already starting to fall, and just millimeters below her was the spatial gate. Thud. In that instant, facing the threat of death, Keiko Sakurada suddenly shattered, turning into countless snowflakes. A few snowflakes did drift into the spatial gate, but most of them drifted elsewhere. 200 meters away, Keiko Sakurada reappeared, her body covered in bloodstains. The snowflakes that had drifted into the alternate dimension were a part of her body. That part was equivalent to being permanently lost, so she was naturally badly injured. But it was better than losing her life. "You're a space-type Esper," Keiko Sakurada said through gritted teeth. Through the various methods Xiao Ran had used, she had finally confirmed his Esper attribute. And that was it. Xiao Ran ignored her and shot out another large number of sonic speed stones. "You are too much," Keiko Sakurada roared, her body suddenly expanding. The nearby snow swirled and attached itself to her, and in an instant, she transformed into an ice giant over 100 meters tall. She threw a punch at Xiao Ran. 100-meter-tall giant. How big would its fist be? This punch was both fast and heavy, easily breaking the sound barrier. That's why, despite such a terrifying fist smashing towards him, there was not the slightest whistling sound. Xiao Ran was perfectly calm, opening a spatial gate right above his head. As the punch came down, a bizarre thing happened. The fist punched into an alternate dimension and vanished instantly. Not only that, because the force was too great, the entire ice giant was rushing forward. So after the fist disappeared, its forearm, then its upper arm, were swallowed one by one. Only then did Keiko Sakurada finally manage to stop her momentum, no longer moving forward, even taking a step back. The massive ice giant was now missing its right arm, looking very strange. Xiao Ran silently lamented. The ice giant seemed to be a single entity, but it was actually composed of countless tiny pieces of snow and ice, which could also be seen as countless individuals. Therefore, the spatial gate could only swallow what it touched and couldn't just suck in the entire ice giant. Moreover, the ice giant's size also exceeded the upper limit of the spatial gate. Even if it were a single entity, it might not have been able to swallow it. As expected, as Espers grew stronger, the instant kill effect of the spatial gate became less and less effective. Wei Lily had survived in the alternate dimension for a few minutes, Duan Chong for even longer, and Qin Sujuan seemed impossible to kill in the alternate dimension. Now, there was even a situation where the spatial gate couldn't fit the target. A single trick couldn't dominate forever. No matter, I'm still a sure shot against martial arts type Espers. Keiko Sakurada's true body was beneath the thick ice and snow of the giant. She could see and hear through the giant, and even simulate expressions. At this moment, her brow was furrowed. This Zhao Xining was too difficult to deal with. His attacks were incredibly sharp, and his defense was impenetrable. How could such a perfect Esper power exist in the world? "Snow like mountains," she grunted, activating her power again. All around Xiao Ran, giant hands made of ice and snow emerged, slapping towards him. Even the ground transformed into a giant ice hand, intending to crush him. Xiao Ran activated spatial exchange. He instantly appeared about 100 meters in front of the giant Keiko Sakurada. A large number of sonic speed stones poured out as he continued to advance, closing to within 100 meters of her. Spatial cut. He aimed to slash at the giant Keiko Sakurada's head. Keiko Sakurada immediately felt a strong sense of crisis, and her entire body instantly turned into ice. Thud! The spatial cut struck, but it couldn't even make a dent. However, the hundreds of sonic speed stones had already hit. The ice giant was instantly blasted to pieces, and Keiko Sakurada's body fell from midair. Good chance. Xiao Ran opened the spatial gate again, preparing to receive Keiko Sakurada from below. Keiko Sakurada let out a sharp cry, and her entire body turned into snowflakes again. Oomph. Xiao Ran activated spatial compression, forcing all the falling snowflakes into the spatial gate. Did it work? No. In the distance, Keiko Sakurada appeared again. Other than her face being as pale as a ghost, she seemed uninjured. She just gave Xiao Ran a hateful look and suddenly dived toward the ground. Bang! When her body touched the snow-covered ground, she dissolved into countless snowflakes that scattered everywhere. She ran? Xiao Ran searched with his spatial perception. Found her. He found someone moving through the ice and snow 5 kilometers away at an incredible speed, about to leave his perception range. Damn it. Why is this woman so hard to kill? Xiao Ran became ruthless, continuously using spatial exchange on himself. 100 meters per exchange, activated with a single thought. With the help of spatial perception, he could precisely locate usable objects on his path and instantly swap with them. How fast he could run depended entirely on how fast his thoughts could turn. After so many days of training, his thoughts were naturally flying. 10 thoughts per second. This meant he could advance 1 kilometer per second. This was, of course, much faster than Keiko Sakurada. He quickly closed the distance between them. 4 kilometers, 2 kilometers, 1 kilometer. 300 meters, 100 meters. That's enough. Spatial exchange. Whoosh, Keiko Sakurada appeared in midair in front of him. This time, Xiao Ran directly opened his domain, intending to kill this woman completely. This woman's abilities were strange and varied. The combination of spatial gate and spatial exchange had already failed twice, so this time he switched back to the spatial domain. Last time it was against 37 people. This time it was against one person, a completely different situation. He didn't want to give Keiko Sakurada any time to react, so he began to deconstruct her immediately. If I turn you into cellular-level particles, can you still come back to life? However, as he was deconstructing her, Keiko Sakurada was also dissipating on her own, turning into snowflakes. Hush, he ran. Xiao Ran looked over 200 meters away. Keiko Sakurada had reappeared, but this time her face was even paler, and there was even a sickly flush on her cheeks. This escape technique was definitely one of her abilities, but using it once probably took a heavy toll. One more time, and she probably wouldn't be able to handle it. He immediately activated spatial exchange to pursue her, but Keiko Sakurada just gave Xiao Ran an incredibly resentful look, transformed back into the 100-meter-plus giant, and took off running. She was really running for her life, her speed frighteningly fast. But no matter how fast she was, could she outrun spatial exchange? Keiko Sakurada had only run for a little over 2 kilometers before Xiao Ran closed the distance to within 100 meters again. So what if you hide inside a giant? Watch me swap you out. Just as Xiao Ran was about to attack, he suddenly felt a sense of danger and immediately used spatial exchange on himself. Whoosh, he appeared 100 meters away to the side. Where he had been standing, a dazzling beam of light slashed past. Plop, it cut into the snow, carving a gash 3 meters long and 5 meters deep. And in that moment, Keiko Sakurada ran off again. But she didn't run far, instead stopping next to a man in samurai attire. The man looked to be in his early 40s, holding a samurai sword. He had 2 wings growing from his back with a wingspan of 10 meters, and the wings were covered in feathers like daggers, emitting a chilling glint. Chairman, this man is called Chao Shining. He's a space-type esper with many strange abilities. He is extremely bizarre. I'm no match for him at all. Keiko Sakurada reverted from her giant form and spoke respectfully to the man. Xiao Ran realized this man must be Oda Shiri. As expected of the leader of the Little Devils here, his strength was no joke. Just now, he had swung his sword from distance, yet the blade energy could cut through ice and snow to a depth of 5 meters. How terrifying. But, with this man's arrival, killing Keiko Sakurada would be difficult. Not only that, Xiao Ran saw more people coming as reinforcements. Oh, so, I've arrived at the Black Dragon Society's headquarters. Oda Shiri raised his hand, and all the little devils stopped in their tracks, standing respectfully behind him. He looked at Xiao Ran and smiled. Mr. Chao, you Chinese have an old saying, he who understands the times is a great man. Our Black Dragon Society is the strongest faction in Haidu, bar none, and Haidu is the most densely populated city in your country. If we can rule in Haidu, then we're the strongest faction in any city in your country. To be our enemy is to go against the tide, which is a very unwise act. But we at the Black Dragon Society are thirsty for talent. As long as you join us, I won't care what you've done before. On the contrary, I will give you great responsibility and let you enjoy endless wealth and glory. His Chinese wasn't very standard, but he had clearly studied Chinese culture extensively, or he wouldn't have been able to use so many idioms. Xiao Ran sneered. The devils were truly cunning. Oda Shiri seemed to be speaking magnanimously, but if he actually believed him, he was guaranteed to be ganged up on and beaten to death the next second. If it were anyone else, Xiao Ran might have put on an act, a competition to see who was the better actor. But with the little devils, forget it. I feel fucking disgusted, even having a civil conversation with you. Come on, let's start with an appetizer. With a thought, a large number of sonic speed steel bars and stones shot out. Moreover, he kept opening spatial gates in different directions, so while the attacks generally came from one direction, there were significant variations. Oda Shiri grunted heavily, clearly displeased. He swung his sword. Whoosh, 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 he unleashed a large amount of blade energy, each slash dazzling and blindingly bright. Bang, 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 the sonic speed stones and steel bars were cut down and shattered by him. He alone neutralized most of Xiao Ran's attack. But Xiao Ran's attacks were pre-stored and didn't consume Esper power to launch, allowing him to fire a large amount at once. Oda Shiri's blade energy, however, consumed a considerable amount of power and couldn't completely neutralize the attack. So, the other little devils also took action, each using their Esper powers to neutralize the remaining attacks. There is strength in numbers. The main thing was having Oda Shiri as the main force. With him tanking most of Xiao Ran's firepower, the others had an easy time. The next moment, countless attacks were fired back at Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran didn't even bother to dodge, just opening a spatial gate to collect all the attacks, and then sending them right back. This was called hitting themselves. He wasn't creating attacks, just transporting them. Instantly, the little devils were thrown into a panic, but they managed to neutralize the wave of attacks. In fact, it was easy to counter this move from Xiao Ran. They just needed to spread out, surround Xiao Ran, and then attack simultaneously. Then there would be no way for Xiao Ran to collect all the attacks, and he would have to consume Esper power. However, once they separated, they would be easily picked off one by Xiao Ran. This was why Oda Shiri didn't give the order to disperse and attack. He frowned, his eyebrows almost tying into a knot. This suddenly appeared opponent was too difficult to handle. He was on the verge of unifying Haidu. The next step was naturally to sweep through the entirety of China with unstoppable momentum, easily taking this vast country into his hands and turning all Chinese people into his slaves and raw materials for providing Esper power. Why did such a monster suddenly appear? He raised his hand. Don't attack together. Go one by one. One by one. Then you, Chao Xining, will also have to consume Esper power to deflect the attacks. He didn't believe Xiao Ran could do it with zero consumption, because the activation of any Esper power required consumption. This was the only scientific aspect of it all so far. The little devils formed groups and took turns attacking. Xiao Ran accepted it all with a smile, but didn't counterattack. Feints and real attacks, he couldn't let the enemy see through him. This way, while Xiao Ran had zero consumption, the little devils were the same. Taking turns attacking meant they could take turns recovering their Esper power. They could also engage in a very, very long battle of attrition with Xiao Ran. The two sides seemed to be a stalemate, but both were scheming. Xiao Ran thought for a moment and decided to retreat. Why fight during the day? The night was his home ground. I'll come back at night. Or you guys will pack up and run like Gaoyong. Retreat. Little devils, don't forget to wash your necks. I'll be back for your dog lives soon. He laughed heartily, activated spatial exchange, and disappeared in an instant. What now? Oda Shiri's face was grim. This had never happened since all of them evolved. Someone came knocking on their door and still managed to get away. You have to understand, their Black Dragon Society was the strongest faction in Haidu. It had always been them bullying others. This damn Chinese man. Chao Xining Baka. He couldn't help but curse. And when Keiko Sakurada reported that everyone she had taken out had been wiped out, Oda Shiri was so angry he almost wanted to kill someone. 52 people, 52 espers, all dead. The loss was too great. Chao Xining Baka. He hated this Chinese man named Chao Xining to death. But what could he do? The man came and went as he pleased. How could he stop him? He really wanted to dig up this Chao's ancestral grave. Xiao Ran seemed to have left, but he made a turn and circled back. He stood in a building, still 3 kilometers away from the residential complex occupied by the Black Dragon Society, but his spatial perception was enough to cover the entire complex. The entire Black Dragon Society had about 300 members, but there were nearly 1,000 people in the complex. Some were women abducted by the Black Dragon Society for them to vent their lust, while most were running fevers in the process of evolving. But regardless of whether they could successfully evolve, their fate would not change in the slightest. Xiao Ran quickly located Otashiri. There were actually 5 women in his room. However, 2 were clearly Japanese women. One looked to be nearly 30, the other only 20. From their calls of Anata and Otu-san, Xiao Ran knew the 2 were Otashiri's wife and daughter. Actually, he had never studied Japanese, but he had later watched Japanese adult films with the girls, which had such terms. After watching enough, he had at least remembered these nouns. There were also Wani-san and Wani-chan, meaning older sister. The little devils were very keen on filming incest-themed movies. Xiao Ran felt he was quite a good student. Obviously, Otashiri's current wife was not his original one. Otherwise, how could a woman barely 30 years old have a 20-year-old daughter? Much like Zhuang Jiqin's family. Speaking of which, he kind of missed that bunch of lunatics from the sanatorium, number 114, number 9. Although they were crazy, they were purely crazy. Not like other espers who seemed to have 800 schemes in their minds. It was still early, just noon. Xiao Ran took out his gear, preparing to have a hot pot meal for himself. But before the water had boiled, he received a phone call. It was from home. He answered immediately. Xiao Ran, Shinron seems to have started evolving. Su Qingmei's voice came through at once. What? Xiao Ran was stunned. He had tried many times before. People who had already evolved once couldn't evolve again. The several girls who had failed had all tried. He had previously suspected that Zhang Jingya was a special case, and maybe others could have a second or even third evolution. No, it really wasn't possible. But now Su Qingmei was saying that Su Shinron had started a second evolution. How are you sure? He asked. Shinron has a high fever, and medicine isn't working at all, Su Qingmei said. This is very similar to how it looks during evolution. Could she really evolve a second time? Xiao Ran thought for a moment and asked, what did she do? Or what happened to her? Su Qingmei immediately replied, this morning, we were planning to clear the snow in the manor. After working for a while, it started to snow lightly. We went back inside, and not long after, Shinron started running a fever. She didn't catch a cold, did she? Xiao Ran asked. If she got chilled, and since Su Shinron wasn't an esper, it was normal for her to get a fever. Su Shinron replied. Lulu tried to heal Shinron, but it didn't work. She also said Shinron isn't sick. If a healer said Su Shinron wasn't sick, then she probably really wasn't. Xiao Ran grew curious. He looked at the time. It was just past 11 a.m., still a long way from evening. Fine. He would go back to Qingfeng Garden first, and then come back at night. He set off immediately, heading for Su City. Over an hour later, he appeared home. Where's Shinron? He asked. In her bedroom. Su Qingmei came to greet him. Xiao Ran went to the 4th floor and saw Su Shinron lying in bed. Sure enough, she had a high fever, and her consciousness was drifting in and out, perfectly matching the characteristics of evolution. He used his enhanced spatial perception to take a look and couldn't help but be slightly surprised. This was indeed an evolution, and a very strange one, because Su Shinron's cells were strengthening. How could this be? You had to know that even if an evolution truly began, and even if it was ultimately successful, there would be no difference from an ordinary person until the energy seed had condensed and automatically dissipated. But looking at Su Shinron, she was clearly already at the stage where the energy seed was dissolving and nourishing her body. The problem was she was still running a high fever, which was part of the long prelude. Strange, truly strange. Snow. Xiao Ran mulled it over and asked Su Qingmei, was there anything unusual about the snow? Su Qingmei thought for a while and shook her head. It was just ordinary snow, and it was very light. It didn't snow for long, no more than half an hour at most. But besides the snow, were there any other variables? Also, it wasn't just Su Shinron. Zhang Jingya, Yin Qin, and many other girls who hadn't successfully evolved were also outside shoveling snow. They should have been hit by snowflakes too. Why didn't they change? Xiao Ran had a bit of a headache. It seemed he would have to wait for Su Shinron to wake up and ask her. Maybe she knew if she had experienced something unusual. It's okay, don't worry, Xiao Ran said. She is indeed evolving, and she has succeeded. Her cells are getting stronger. Based on my experience, this is the sign of a successful evolution. The strange things are, 1, Her evolution is inexplicable. 2. It's too rapid. And 3. It's still accompanied by a high fever. Su Qingmei was both happy and worried. It was a good thing that her sister was evolving, but why was she still running a high fever? This was different from everyone else, which made her worry. Xiao Ran watched for a while longer, then left Su Shinron's room. To stand guard was useless, but he didn't know when Su Shinron might suddenly change, and if he were in Haidu, he definitely couldn't get back in time. So, after some consideration, Xiao Ran decided not to go to Haidu tonight. He would just have to let those scumbags from the Black Dragon Society live a few more days. And since he was back home, Xiao Ran took out the corpses of the espers, absorbed some himself, and let the girls have their share. Xiao Ran estimated that he had killed 3 little devils at the school, and later took in 36 at once, for a total of 39. The strength of the little devils varied, but on average, they could provide 4 portions of esper power, which was about 160 portions. He absorbed about 100 portions, and the rest was shared among the girls. Soon, the side effects of absorbing the esper power kicked in. Instantly, it was a world of dazzling colors, with all roads leading to paradise. A night of debauchery, very satisfying, very satisfying. Whoosh, Xiao Ran's figure flashed, and he appeared in Su Shinron's bedroom. Her skin was flushed red, and steam was even rising from it. Xiao Ran immediately activated his enhanced spatial perception to examine her closely. Powerful energy was surging within Su Shinron's body, but it wasn't turbulent or violent. On the contrary, it was very gentle. Even without Xiao Ran's intervention, it wouldn't cause any harm to her body. She had reached the critical moment of evolution, a moment that would decide life or death for others, with a 90% chance of death. But in Xiao Ran's eyes, Su Shinron was 100% certain to pass smoothly. Strange. The last time he saw such a smooth process was with the artificial espers created by Qin Sujuan. Using her soul fragments as a core, the esper she created had no potential for improvement, and their esper power even needed to be refined. But Su Shinron and Qin Sujuan had never met, so there was no possibility of Qin Sujuan tampering with her. Fine, he would ask her when she woke up. At that moment, Su Qingmei also ran over. She was naturally the most worried about her own sister. 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Suddenly, Su Shinron let out a soft moan and snapped her eyes open. Shinron, Su Qingmei called out at once. Su Shinron was still a bit dazed. She suddenly saw 2 faces in front of her. When she saw that one of them was Xiao Ran, she immediately threw herself at him, hugging him tightly. I had so many nightmares, it was so scary. Su Qingmei rolled her eyes. I'm your sister, and now I'm second priority? Xiao Ran patted Su Shinron's shoulder. You should have an esper power now. See what it is. Su Shinron let go of Xiao Ran and only then noticed that the other person beside her was her sister. She couldn't help but blush. Crap, I was so focused on the man, I forgot my sister. She lowered her head with a guilty conscience while she began to sense her new ability. I really have an esper power. She was overjoyed, incredibly excited. It couldn't be helped. That green tea bitch was always putting her down, showing off in front of her. She had dreamed of having an esper power, so naturally, she was surprised, excited, and thrilled. Xiao Ran and Su Qingmei both looked at her, wondering what esper power she had awakened. Su Shinron suddenly smiled. It was a strange smile, but Xiao Ran and Su Qingmei felt as if they were infected by it, as if something wonderful had happened to them, and they couldn't help but smile too. Could it be? Su Shinron then showed a sad expression. The joy that had just risen in Xiao Ran and Su Qingmei immediately vanished, and they suddenly felt like bursting into tears. Xiao Ran's heart skipped a beat. His emotions were actually being influenced. You have to know, he was a big shot who had absorbed over 7,000 portions of esper power, yet he was being influenced by a novice who had just awakened. Huh, that's not right. Xiao Ran checked Su Shinron's cell strength. Even though she had just awakened and her body's enhancement was not yet complete, her cell strength was already 5 times that of a normal 1-portion esper. Xiao Ran knew perfectly well what a 1-portion esper was like. His home used to be full of them. But Su Shinron was at 5 times the strength right after awakening, and she wasn't even a martial arts type. So, after her body finished strengthening in 2 or 3 days, would she effectively be equivalent to 10 portions? Awakening with the strength of 10 portions of esper power. Where did that come from? That's great, Shinron. You finally have an esper power. Su Qingmei hugged her sister, her expression filled with excitement. Su Shinron nodded vigorously. Now I can properly clap back at that green tea bitch. Let's see how arrogant she can be now. Right, I'm gonna make her cry her eyes out. TSK, TSK. The little girl was quite vengeful. Xiao Ran, however, didn't care about the girl's jealous squabbles. He asked, "Do you remember what happened before you passed out?" Shinron recalled for a moment and nodded repeatedly. I remember. I remember. After it started snowing, I saw a snowflake that was very special because it was golden. I tried to catch it with my hand, but the snowflake melted as soon as it touched my skin. Then I felt my heart beat faster, and my whole body got hot. Xiao Ran was stunned. A golden snowflake. Wait. The substance Qin Sujuan extracted from those artificial espers' bodies was also a pale golden liquid, wasn't it? She called it esper fluid, and absorbing it could enhance one's esper power. Unfortunately, after being taken into the alternate dimension, Qin Sujuan had also consumed the remaining half of the esper fluid. Otherwise, he could take it out now for Shinron to see if it was the same color. Was there a connection between the two? If Qin Sujuan wasn't dead, he would really be worried that this woman was up to something. But the problem was, this woman was dead, deconstructed to the cellular level by his spatial domain, and her esper power had been absorbed by him. It was impossible for her to be alive. So what was going on? If one removed the factor of an esper's influence, could it be a purely natural phenomenon? Was there now another way for espers to be created? And Shinron had evolved with the equivalent of nearly 10 portions of power right from the start. This was a bit terrifying. Thinking about it carefully, all esper powers were caused by mysterious cosmic rays. So, what's so strange about these rays mutating and allowing people to become espers without risk? No, maybe it was because Shinron had evolved once before. Although she failed, she might have become immune to the possibility of death, so this time she directly became an esper, while others still had to go through the 10-day evolution process. The sample size was too small to draw a conclusion. But there was now indeed a new path to evolution. Xiao Ran had previously guessed that after the start of the full-scale evolution, the already pitifully small number of survivors would be reduced by another 90%, with only 10% ultimately surviving and about 1 in 1,000 becoming espers. But looking at it now, the number of espers would undoubtedly surge. The premise was that these golden snowflakes would continue to appear in insufficient numbers. Can I absorb these golden snowflakes? Xiao Ran thought. Can they be absorbed directly like after an esper dies? Unfortunately, he couldn't test it, and not to mention whether this golden snowflake was an isolated case. Even if it became a common occurrence in the future, the Earth was too big. Who knew where the next snow would fall? What a headache. This undoubtedly added new variables. After thinking for a while, Xiao Ran could only push the doubts in his mind aside. Forget it. What's the use of thinking so much? He'd take it one step at a time. The boat will straighten itself when it reaches the bridgehead, as the ancestors said. Xiao Ran looked at Shinron with interest. A lot of time had passed. The side effects should be kicking in by now. However, Shinron's eyes were clear, her face flushed only with excitement, not with the red haze of desire. Strange. Xiao Ran couldn't help but ask, "Aren't you feeling anything special?" Shinron was clueless, looking at Xiao Ran with a dazed expression. Su Qingmei also realized it and was surprised. After awakening or absorbing esper power, there are always very strong side effects. You don't have any. Shinron finally remembered, and her pretty face turned even redder. So embarrassing. She carefully felt herself and shook her head. No, I don't have any lewd thoughts. Speak from the heart. Don't deceive yourself, Xiao Ran said solemnly. Shinron looked down at the large hand pressed against her heart and was a bit speechless. Shouldn't I be the one touching my heart? This guy, always finding ways to tease me. As it turned out, Shinron really had no side effects. Although her gaze was flirtatious, it was not the kind born from lust. From beginning to end, she was just immersed, not driven by desire. This was truly strange. Unfortunately, all the espers in the alternate dimension had been used up. Otherwise, he could have let her absorb some to see if she still had no side effects, or if it was only during awakening. Variables. Xiao Ran dawdled at home for most of the day, only setting off for Haidu at 5 p.m. Lumé and Shinua's evolution wouldn't be over for a while, so he could go out and fool around with a clear conscience. It would only take an hour or so to get back. Night fell, and Xiao Ran arrived at the Black Dragon Society's territory. Tonight, he was going on a killing spree. There was no need for any pity for the little Japs. No matter who you are, all of you can just die. Xiao Ran opened his spatial perception, and the entire residential complex was under his control. Although he only recognized Oda Shiri and Keiko Sakurada, By identifying their self-strength, he immediately found Ozawa Taro, the curse user. He was a man in his 20s, with messy hair and a beard, unkempt, a complete otaku. Unlike the other little devils, whose rooms all had at least one woman to serve them, this man's room had no women. Instead, there were rows of thighs. Women's legs, likely cut from living people, were arranged neatly. Ozawa Taro was just staring at these thighs, doing unspeakable things. What a fucking pervert. The little Japs were all perverts, and this one was the king of perverts. Xiao Ran suppressed his discomfort and located 5 other little devils whose strength was clearly a cut above the rest. These 5 should be the so-called 10 generals, but only 5 were here now. The others had probably been sent out to grind, just like that Duan Chong. Apart from these 8, the little devil side didn't have any other experts. There was a clear gap in strength. The 9th ranked had absorbed at most 30 portions of Esper power, completely insignificant. Xiao Ran had 2 choices. First, capture the king to capture the bandits. He could deal with the 8 experts one by one. Even with nearly 300 little devils left, if they faced him head-on without running, Xiao Ran was confident he could finish them all in a few minutes. Second, leave the 8 experts alone for now and deal with the small fries first. This would both weaken the little devil's strength and make himself stronger, making it easier to face the 8 experts later. After some thought, Xiao Ran decided to start with the experts. The first target was Ozawa Taro, that damn pervert. At this moment, a thick fog had rolled in, and with the cover of darkness, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. It was the perfect time for killing. Xiao Ran moved out stealthily. His current Esper power reserve was at 100%, and he hadn't used abilities like spatial exchange even once. He could use it continuously over 700 times, all in preparation for tonight's hunt. He moved silently and arrived at the base of the building where Ozawa Taro was. The building was only 9 stories tall, certainly not over 100 meters, well within the range of spatial exchange. If all you can do is curse, then you can go die. Xiao Ran tossed a stone. Just as it began to fall, he opened a spatial gate below, then locked onto both the stone and Ozawa Taro, activating spatial exchange. Whoosh, the perverted otaku suddenly appeared in front of Xiao Ran, falling towards the invisible spatial gate. Without a doubt, Ozawa Taro disappeared without a struggle. Wait, Xiao Ran frowned, because what appeared in the alternate dimension was not a person, but a strand of hair. A living person had turned into a strand of hair? How bizarre. This must be Ozawa Taro's Esper power. Indeed, no Esper should be underestimated. He might not have the physique of a martial arts type, nor the flashy skills of a mage type, nor could he transform like a beast type, but he had this kind of death-defying technique. A strand of hair for a life? Damn, do I have to shave this guy bald first? But with a little thought, one could guess that such a life-saving method must be extremely limited. How could it be used whenever he wanted? 3 times, 5 times, 10 times at most. Meanwhile, Ozawa Taro appeared in a secret room, his face filled with astonishment and fear. He was just sitting at home, yet he had inexplicably appeared outside. Before he could see anything, he was forced to use one of his life-saving abilities. You had to know, creating a substitute hair was extremely difficult, and once created, it only existed for 10 days. It was gone after 1 use. He only had 5 in total, placed in different locations. This death was truly baffling. Chao Xining, it must be that Chinese man. Keiko Sakurada had given a detailed account of her battle with that Chinese man. After analyzing it together, they had basically figured out this Chinese man's abilities. So, after his shock, he immediately realized that Chao Xining had come to kill him. How could the opponents see in the thick fog? This was an ability they hadn't anticipated. A miscalculation. Ozawa Taro immediately sounded the alarm. Doot, doot, doot. He blew a whistle. It seemed ordinary, but the sound instantly spread throughout the entire complex. It was made by an Esper, and the sound it produced had powerful penetrative properties. The next moment, all the Espers in the complex were alerted. Enemy attack. Kazama-kun. Oda Shiri roared. Yes, a man burst out of a window. Strangely, he didn't fall but floated in midair, even though he clearly had no wings. After acknowledging the order, he took a deep breath. Instantly, a great wind raged. The snow danced a white blur, but the fog was actually blown away. Coupled with the bright beams from searchlights on the rooftops, the entire complex wasn't quite as bright as day, but it wasn't far off. TSK. To become a major faction, they really did have all sorts of talented people. This little devil, named Kazama, was one of the 10 generals. His ability was probably wind manipulation, otherwise he couldn't have created a gale with a single breath, dispersing such a thick fog. Unfortunately, this person was not only floating in midair, but he was also very far from the ground, beyond the limit of spatial exchange. A large group of little devils had already rushed out, and the searchlight beams were all pointing at him. Obviously, he had been discovered. Since I'm here, how can I leave empty-handed? Xiao Ran activated spatial exchange again. As long as they were within the ability's range, he didn't care who they were, he brought them all over, letting them fall into the spatial gate. However, not everyone fell helplessly into the gate. On the contrary, many of them displayed strange abilities to escape their predicament. But when Xiao Ran used spatial compression to press down, 90% of them couldn't resist and could only fall in. But it was only 10 people. Swish, a terrifying blade energy slashed over, forcing Xiao Ran to open the spatial gate in front of him to absorb the attack. He smiled and then spat the blade energy back out, sending it towards the group of little devils. This was blade energy from Otashiri. How could ordinary little devils block it? Just then, Keiko Sahara rushed out, transforming into a 100-meter-plus ice giant, taking the blade energy head-on with her massive body. Plop! With one slash, the ice giant was cut in half at the waist, but such a sharp attack was also neutralized. Xiao Ran sighed slightly and turned to leave without hesitation. With spatial exchange activated, who could stop him? This night raid killed 10 little devils, a worthy gain. He came in high spirits and left satisfied, but the little devils were all furious. Baka, Otashiri cursed. They were the Great Black Dragon Society, yet they were ambushed at night by a Chinese man, losing 10 espers. Their loss only proved the enemy's strength. This Chinese man can move in the fog. Everyone, stay alert tonight in case he launches a surprise return attack. Otashiri said. Yes. All the little devils bowed their heads. Although they only lost ordinary subordinates for the Black Dragon Society, which had always been dominant, to be beaten so badly still left every one of them holding a breath of anger, and at the same time, intense fear. This Chinese man was too terrifying. When the enemy thought Xiao Ran would launch a surprise return attack, he had no such intention. He had a nice sleep. Waking up, he felt comfortable. After breakfast, he thought for a moment and decided to go check on the Jung-an settlement. How long would it take him to run to the Jung-an settlement? When he arrived at the gate, the guards already recognized him and let him in directly. Wong Tai immediately came out to greet him. He first looked Xiao Ran up and down, and upon seeing no injuries on him, he breathed a sigh of relief and said, "It's good that you're okay." Perhaps Xiao Ran was just bluffing and hadn't actually gone to the Black Dragon Society. Xiao Ran handed some frozen food to Wong Tai. You can't show up empty-handed, right? Besides, he greatly admired these retired soldiers. Not wanting to be a saint himself was one thing, but as long as the saints weren't his teammates, it was fine. Wong Tai naturally accepted it happily and became even more enthusiastic toward Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran then went to see Sun Lumé. This passionate young man was now full of fighting spirit and passion, as if he had found his purpose in life, full of energy. Brother Xiao, where have you been these past 2 days? Sun Lumé asked. Just took a trip to the Black Dragon Society's old lair, killed a few of them, Xiao Ran said casually. Sun Lumé was stunned for a moment, then laughed. Brother Xiao, you're really kidding. Xiao Ran was speechless. I was telling the truth. Forget it, believe what you want. Are you used to living here? He asked. I feel like this is the path I should be on in life. Sun Lumé nodded. Xiao Ran joked. Not going to be a purchasing agent anymore. How could I? Sun Lumé also laughed. Will anyone need Korean cosmetics and skincare products in the future? Probably not, Xiao Ran said. Both of them laughed heartily. After chatting for a while, Sun Lumé went to get busy. These espers not only had to go out to find supplies every day, but also had to undergo training in their free time to improve their combat skills, mainly focusing on cooperation in battle to make 1 + 1 greater than 2. Xiao Ran, on the other hand, wandered around bored. Brother Xiao. After a short while, 3 girls appeared gracefully in front of him. Weren't they Lin Xiao and her 2 friends? It had only been 2 days, but they had a kind of, how to put it, before, even when they were in distress, they still had an air of being pampered. But now, it was different. They all seemed to have turned into aunties who worked in the fields. Not that they had aged that much, but that was the feeling they gave off. They had probably been busy planting vegetables every day. Lin Xiao burst into tears directly, saying, Brother Xiao, take me with you. It's too hard here. We have to get up at 6 every day, run before we even eat, and then go to work right after. Look at my hands. They used to be so white and smooth. Now, they're almost calloused. This was a bit of an exaggeration, but if she worked for another 10 days or half a month, she would definitely get calluses. Lu Tian and Meng Exen also nodded repeatedly, both on the verge of tears, looking pitiful. They had never suffered like this in their lives. Brother Xiao, just let us follow you. We don't have any extravagant hopes. As long as you can support us, we will listen to whatever you say, Lin Xiao said, biting her lip, tears welling up in her eyes. MHM, MHM, MHM. Lu Tian and the other girl nodded quickly. Before Xiao Ran could refuse, he couldn't help but let out a soft huh. Someone was coming. A group of 5 people. The leader was very, very strong, definitely not weaker than Wu Shanglong. The other 4 were very weak, with 100-fold difference in power. The 5 people arrived at the community gate, and the sentry immediately notified via radio. Report, Boss Shun from Buyuan settlement is here. Oh, so it was the boss of one of the 6 major factions. No wonder he was so strong. Xiao Ran watched from a window. This boss Shun had an astonishing height, at least 2 meters tall, with a large frame. Just standing there, he looked like a bipedal bear. Wu Shanglong had already gone out to meet him. At 175 centimeters, Wu Shanglong suddenly looked small and delicate in front of him. However, Wu Shanglong's presence was not inferior in the slightest. Facing such a big man, he was still full of dominance. What are you here for? Wu Shanglong asked bluntly, not giving him any face at all. This boss Shun from the Buyuan settlement was named Shun Mingfei. It was said that he used to be a mixed martial arts fighter and had won several championships. As for his Esper attribute, no one had told Xiao Ran. Shun Mingfei laughed heartily. Boss Wu, you don't seem to like me very much. I've always disliked you. Wu Shanglong was still completely blunt, his face taut. Spit it out. Shun Mingfei was clearly angered by this. He stared at Wu Shanglong for a long time, his gaze as sharp as a sword. After a good while, he said, "You stinking soldiers are really like stones in a latrine, stinky and hard. You want to fight?" Wu Shanglong said coldly. Shun Mingfei waved his hand, looking helpless. Fine, I'm not here to fight. I want to talk about an alliance with you. I say, Boss Wu, can't you change your way of thinking? You're clearly an Esper, yet you eat and live with a bunch of ordinary people, promoting some kind of equality. This world has never been equal. It used to be money, now it's strength. With strength, you're a cut above the rest. You can have privileges. I'll give you a chance. Our 2 families will form an alliance. First, we'll wipe out the other 3 one by one. By then, our strength will definitely be above that group of little devils. Then we'll kill those little devils, and we can rule Haidu. Boss Wu, cooperate with me. Shun Mingfei stared at Wu Shanglong, his face full of expectation. Wu Shanglong flew into a rage and threw a punch at Shun Mingfei. Boom! The fiery fist burned the air terrifyingly. Shun Mingfei immediately used his Esper power. His already 2-meter-tall body expanded again, becoming a behemoth nearly 4 meters tall, covered in striped fur. His hands also turned into huge, sharp claws, which he swung at Wu Shanglong in a fierce counterattack. The 2 of them clashed, and both took a few steps back. Wu Shanglong's fist was clearly scratched, but no blood flowed out, only a string of flames fell. Shun Mingfei's fur was slightly scorched. TSK is to SK. Boss Wu, even if you don't agree, you don't have to be so ruthless, right? Shun Mingfei was still making sarcastic remarks. Wu Shanglong's face was ashen, and he said grimly, "If it weren't for the fact that we still need to fight the little devils together, just for what you said, I could have you shot." Shun Mingfei laughed loudly. Boss Wu, has being a soldier made you stupid? Fine, I've done my best. If you insist on being stubborn, don't regret it later. Farewell. He led his men away without even entering the gate. Get lost. Wu Shanglong spat. As he walked back into the complex, his brows furrowed tightly. Shun Mingfei had probably approached more than just him, but just because he refused, it didn't mean others would do the same. Would the alliance of the 5 major factions collapse because of this? Although Xiao Ran was more than 100 meters away from the complex gate, under his spatial perception, not a single word of the conversation between Wu Shanglong and Shun Mingfei was missed. He shook his head. Was the alliance between the 5 major factions already so fragile? The devils hadn't been eliminated, yet they were already thinking about internal strife. But on the other hand, Shun Mingfei's proposal wasn't entirely absurd. If their 2 factions really did unite, as long as they launched a surprise attack, they could totally assassinate any of their allies. Once they could absorb the Esper power of a leader, they might be able to break the deadlock in an instant and become the sole dominant force. From this perspective, Shan Mingfei wasn't completely stupid. Xiao Ran shook his head. It seemed that the alliance of the 5 major factions in Haidu was about to shatter very soon. With Shan Mingfei going around to the 4 factions and saying this, which faction could still trust the others? Had the other 3 factions secretly allied with Shan Mingfei? Now that there were no binding laws or regulations, wasn't it natural for everyone to be suspicious? Was this Shan Mingfei an idiot to stir up internal trouble when there was still the major enemy of the devils? Brother Xiao. Seeing Xiao Ran in a daze, Lin Xiao actually walked over and was about to kneel between his legs, her intention all too clear. Xiao Ran frowned and casually pushed her aside. Go play by yourself. He couldn't be bothered with this kind of woman. She was still a high school student, yet she had already seen countless men. Being rejected again, Lin Xiao's expression turned ugly, and hatred for Xiao Ran grew in her heart. But what could she do? In front of an esper, ordinary people were like trash. If it weren't for the fact that this place was controlled by a group of retired veterans, women like them wouldn't even have the qualification to participate in labor, but would have become playthings until they were tired of, then forced to evolve to extract their last value. This was the apocalypse. Humanity had long been annihilated. They were very lucky. At first, they had Sun Limin's protection, and then they were sent here. If they had escaped from other settlements, they would definitely think this place was heaven. Human desire is a bottomless pit, never to be satisfied. No matter how unwilling the 3 girls were, they could only leave dejectedly. Xiao Ran didn't leave. He continued to wander around here, killing time. He decided to go and play at the Black Dragon Society's place again at night. Since the decapitation plan couldn't proceed smoothly, he would kill the small fries first, eroding them step by step. Now, he would rest and wait for the night's action. Yesterday, he killed 10. Today, he had to kill at least 20. Ugh. After last night's commotion, Odashiri and his men would definitely be prepared today. It would be difficult to kill another 10, let alone 20. It's okay. Killing even 1 is good. By eliminating this group of little devils, his Esper level could reach a new height. He wondered if he could develop a new ability. Fighting the devils. This should be the default setting for every countryman. People like Shan Mingfei were defective products, a waste of his large build. At noon, Xiao Ran ate something simple. After eating rich and spicy food every day, it was nice to have something light for a change. Sun Limin came and went a few times, chatting with Xiao Ran and excitedly inviting him to go out and search for supplies. Since he was idle anyway, Xiao Ran agreed. The 2 set off, searching through the high-rise buildings of the city. Xiao Ran's spatial perception could easily find supplies, but in front of Sun Limin, he was a martial arts type master. How could he show off his precognitive ability? Anyway, he didn't have much need for supplies, and finding them would be troublesome as he would have to carry them back. He couldn't be bothered to remind him. They searched, and after more than an hour, they had found nothing. The nearby shopping malls had long been emptied. Sun Limin was very disappointed. He was looking forward to making a good showing, bringing back a large amount of supplies and gaining the recognition of his comrades. But reality was so cruel. Xiao Ran had no intention of comforting him. Just as he was about to call him back, he was slightly taken aback. His spatial perception captured a woman walking into the edge of his perception range. Her steps were a bit staggered. Even though she was dressed in thick clothes, her pretty face was pale from the cold, and her lips had lost all color. This was a great beauty with a score of 90 or above, only 24 or 25 years old, with a very good figure. Ugh, Xiao Ran subconsciously enhanced his perception, seeing the woman's figure clearly. Large, thin, curvy, fair. What was large, what was thin, what was curvy, what was fair, one could only appreciate for oneself. Just then, it suddenly started snowing from the sky. It was snowing. The woman stopped, looked up, and even stretched out her hand, as if to catch the snowflakes falling from the sky. 1, 2 snowflakes drifted onto her beautiful face. She closed her eyes slightly, as if making a certain decision. A few seconds later, she opened her eyes, revealing a smile of enlightenment. She undid her thick down jacket. Inside was a bright red wedding dress, purely Chinese style. She took off her hat, revealing her hair, which was neatly combed without a single strand out of place, styled into an exquisite hairdo, with gold and silver ornaments adorning it. Although there were many, it didn't give off a nouveau riche feeling at all, but rather a kind of elegant beauty. She kicked off her leather boots and, barefoot, lay down. Her red dress spread out. In the vast snowfield, her hair was blacker than ink, and her clothes were as red as blood, incredibly eye-catching. This woman was clearly committing suicide. In such a thin wedding dress, she would freeze to death in less than 5 minutes. She closed her eyes. Although she was trembling from the extreme cold, her heart was incredibly calm. A smile even appeared on her lips, as if bidding farewell to this world. Just then, a golden snowflake fell from the sky. Xiao Ran was suddenly startled. A golden snowflake! He actually saw it, and so quickly. This snowflake was exactly as Su Shinron had described, and it was also a bit like the pale golden liquid that Qin Sujuan had extracted, only this one was much more concentrated. The Esper fluid was pale gold, very, very pale, while this was pure gold. The difference was still quite large. So this was Esper fluid, but an enhanced version, which allowed Su Shinron to achieve the equivalent of 10 portions of power upon evolution. What was the essence of this Esper fluid? Xiao Ran enhanced his spatial perception to the extreme, but he couldn't see anything special about this golden snowflake. It seemed that only the color was different. What a pity! Xiao Ran shook his head. Spatial perception was a huge spherical area centered on him, and the woman was at the edge. What did that mean? By the time he captured this golden snowflake, it was already about to land on the ground, falling towards the face of the woman lying on the ground. Xiao Ran sighed. Even if he activated spatial exchange now, it was impossible to rush over and snatch it before the golden snowflake fell on the woman's face. He had to give up this tempting idea. However, he couldn't snatch it. But could he not go and have a look? Let's go. Let's check over there, Xiao Ran said. Without waiting for Sun Limin's reply, he started walking in the direction of the woman in the wedding dress. Sun Limin was stunned for a moment, then hurried to catch up. Brother Xiao, wait for me. Xiao Ran walked with a clear purpose. Although Sun Limin was a little puzzled, he didn't ask. Everyone has their own secrets, and he wasn't so tactless as to ask about everything. He was even more curious. Xiao Ran suddenly said they should go over there. Was something going to happen? The beautiful woman in the wedding dress was more than 7 kilometers away from them. It would naturally take some time to walk there. After Xiao Ran had walked 3 kilometers, he found a person appearing within his perception range, following the footprints left by the woman in the wedding dress. This was a handsome-looking man, definitely an Esper. Xiao Ran could see that his cells were far stronger than an ordinary person's, but his strength was limited at most 10 portions. Xiao Ran quickened his pace slightly because this person's target was obviously the woman in the wedding dress. He had to get there first. Brother Xiao, we don't have to be in such a hurry. Sun Limin was starting to struggle. His Esper energy was no more than 10 portions, so when Xiao Ran accelerated, he felt the strain. Xiao Ran ignored him. He just needed to keep moving forward. He wouldn't get lost anyway. A few minutes later, a splash of blood red appeared in the vast white snow. A dress as red as blood. Xiao Ran walked over. Up close, and with his own eyes, the woman was naturally more vivid, especially in this vast snowfield. Her bright red wedding dress was particularly eye-catching. The woman's heart was beating very fast, over 150 times per minute, and her body temperature was extremely abnormal, exceeding 40 degrees. The extreme cold couldn't cool her down at all. The snow around her had clearly melted, but was immediately refrozen, causing her to sink slightly into the snowfield. If this went on, she would probably slowly sink to the bottom of the snow, covered by a thick layer of ice, as if entering a natural ice coffin. That's right, she must have started evolving. In just a short while, Xiao Ran discovered that the cells in her body had strengthened significantly. The golden snowflake could really make people evolve, and it was 100% successful. There was no need to wait for 10 days or so for the energy seed to condense. It skipped that process and went directly to the strengthening stage. No, it wasn't the golden snowflake that made people evolve, but the golden liquid within it. The golden substance. The liquid form was just one manifestation, and Xiao Ran had seen the golden liquid extracted by Qin Sujuan. It was actually very pale, far less brilliant than that golden snowflake. So, this was the correct way for the entire population to evolve? No failure, no life-threatening danger. Xiao Ran sensed around, but although the light snow continued, not a single flake was golden. It was the same within a 7-kilometer radius. It seemed that this golden substance was pitifully rare. Xiao Ran sighed. Even with his spatial perception, which was like a cheat, obtaining the golden substance was still a matter of chance. However, as long as the golden substance fell within 7 kilometers of him, he would definitely have the best chance of getting it. A situation like the woman in the wedding dress was an exception. She was too close to the edge of his perception, making it impossible for him to rush over in time. And if the golden snowflake didn't land on a person, would it still melt and disappear? He didn't know. He had no chance to try. Brother Xiao. Sun Limin came running over, panting for breath. He had been running at full speed all the way. He wasn't a martial arts type, so even though his stamina was several times that of a normal person, he was exhausted. You run too, huh? Sun Limin suddenly saw the woman in the wedding dress, and an expression of both shock and amazement appeared on his face. In the midst of ice and snow, a woman wearing only a thin wedding dress lay, as if asleep. This was already a surprising sight, and the woman was also breathtakingly beautiful, naturally making one's eyes light up with pity. Then, Sun Limin shook his head with a look of regret. Xiao Ran chuckled. She's not dead yet. Sun Limin couldn't believe it. She's not dead yet. Do you want to check her heartbeat? Xiao Ran said nonchalantly. Sun Limin glanced at the woman's chest, which was still a towering peak even while lying down, and his face turned red with embarrassment. And no need. Xiao Ran was amused. You're not still a virgin, are you? No, you've absorbed Esper power at least once. Could it be you, hiss? He seemed to have thought of something, and his mouth gaped in shock. Don't say it, Brother Xiao, don't say it. Sun Limin couldn't even lift his head. Holy crap, Duan Chong was a fake saint, but this one in front of him really had the potential to become a true saint. No wonder he felt like he had found his home in the Jung-an settlement. You two are truly aligned in your ideals. Just then, the person following the woman's footprints finally appeared in their field of vision. Brother Xiao, someone's coming. Sun Limin couldn't help but be on guard. He was a good person, but that didn't mean he was a fool, completely unguarded against anyone. On the contrary, he was quite sharp. Xiao Ran nodded, indicating he knew. Ruaji. The man saw the red dress in the snow and was both shocked and delighted. He hurried over. After taking just one step, he noticed Xiao Ran and Sun Limin, and his expression became solemn. But he didn't stop. He continued, walking forward, stopping about 10 meters in front of the three of them. This was what he considered a safe distance. He could attack or retreat. That's my wife. Please step aside, the man said. Xiao Ran didn't doubt this much. After all, the woman was still wearing a wedding dress. However, this woman had run out in the severe cold, preferring to commit suicide. What did that mean? Xiao Ran wasn't one to meddle in other people's business, but this woman had just absorbed a golden snowflake and started evolving. She had extremely high research value. And putting that aside, this woman had clearly had a falling out with a man, so why should he hand over an esper to someone else? It wasn't because he found the woman beautiful. Was he that kind of shallow, lustful person? No. But before Xiao Ran could answer, the woman in the wedding dress actually woke up. She swayed as she sat up, casting a complicated gaze at the man. She suddenly turned her head to Xiao Ran and said, He's not my husband, just a heartless scumbag. Take me away. If you can do that, I'll follow you from now on. This statement infuriated the man. His face went white, and he yelled, Shu Ruaji. What the hell are you talking about? I'm not some promiscuous woman. Seeing Shu Ruaji airing their dirty laundry in public, the man, Zhang Rongmin, turned red in the face. A murderous glint flashed in his eyes as he looked at Xiao Ran and Sun Limin, clearly already thinking about silencing them. Sun Limin was completely dumbfounded. Xiao Ran, on the other hand, was very calm. Since the apocalypse, he had witnessed all sorts of human tragedies, comedies, and melodramas. Nothing, no matter how much it shattered his worldview, could faze him anymore. Zhang Rongmin took a deep breath and said, Let's talk about this at home. Don't make a scene here. Shu Ruaji was clearly not in a good state. Her face was as red as if it were on fire. She had a high fever and should have been unconscious, but her intense resentment had woken her up upon hearing her husband's voice and kept her lucid enough to say so much. She smiled miserably. Make a scene? Isn't it a disgrace when you send your own wife to your cousin? Ha! Since you don't mind wearing a green hat, what does it matter who puts it on you? Zhang Rongmin glanced at Xiao Ran and the other man. Unsure of their strength, he didn't dare to make a rash move. He suppressed his anger and said, Do you think I wanted to? But Jeang Yuankai specifically asked for you. If I didn't agree, not only would he not let us join, but he would also come after us. Our whole family will die, and you won't escape being captured and played with by him either. Sacrificing you can save more people. I love you. Of course, I don't want you to be touched by another man. My heart was bleeding when I made this decision. But this is definitely not my selfishness. It's just that your fate is already unchangeable, and I want to save more people. This speech was less about convincing Shu Ruaji and more of an explanation for Xiao Ran and the other man. See, I'm not a scumbag, nor do I want a green hat. I was forced to do it. Sacrificing you can save many people. How can you not make the sacrifice? Shiruaji's pretty face was pale. If you hadn't agreed to Jeang Yuankai without hesitation, but had said you were willing to die with me, maybe I would have sacrificed myself for you. But your performance showed me that you are an incredibly selfish person. Zhang Rongmin got angry and shouted, "How am I selfish? You are the woman I love most, that's true, but I also have parents and a younger sister. Don't I have to consider them? You're the selfish one. Just for some dignity, some honor, you can sacrifice all your relatives?" TSK. Xiao Ran listened with great interest. In the apocalypse, the most fascinating thing was always the human heart. Every time you thought you had plumbed the depths of human shamelessness, reality would always set a new low. Interesting, this was much more interesting than stepping on an enemy's face to show off. He wished he could pull up a chair and crack some melon seeds. He could easily do it, but he couldn't scare people away, or he wouldn't get to watch the show. Alas, a small imperfection. He was watching the show, but Sun Limin couldn't hold back any longer. He jumped out and said, "How can you be so shameless? If I were you, I'd fight that Jeang Yuankai guy. Death is just a part of life. What's there to be afraid of? You can't even protect your own wife. What are you talking about protecting your family? Ha! I fucking hate people like you the most." Zhang Rongmin snorted. "Do you know who Jeang Yuankai is? He's the boss of the Buyuan settlement, the leader of one of the 6 strongest factions in all of Haidu. Knowing that, do you still dare to oppose him?" Sun Limin spat forcefully. "Let alone the boss of one faction. If someone wanted to mess with my wife, even if the leaders of all 6 factions came, I'd dare to fight them. This was what you call irreconcilable differences. People are different." Zhang Rongmin sneered. "You can only run your mouth now? If you really met Jeang Yuankai, you'd probably be kneeling faster than anyone. Bring Jeang Yuankai over here and see if I kneel." Sun Limin said with heroic bravado. I'm here." A voice sounded, and a gust of wind suddenly blew from ahead. When the wind stopped, a man was standing there. He was quite short, only about 167 centimeters, with plain looks, a far cry from the tall and graceful Zhang Rongmin. He was also fat-headed and chubby, exuding a fierce and mercenary air, much like a street loafer from before. Zhang Rongmin's face changed, and he quickly said, "Cousin, you're here." Shiruaji began to tremble, her face turning incredibly ugly. She deeply loathed this good-for-nothing cousin. Half a year ago, at her wedding, this cousin had tried to grope her under the guise of wedding games, but she had sternly told him off. Unexpectedly, after the cataclysm, not only did he gain Esper powers, but he also became the leader of a major faction. He even found their family and demanded that her husband offer her to him. The key was, Zhang Rongmin had agreed. She couldn't accept it. If she had to be toyed with by a disgusting man like Jeang Yuankai, she would rather die. Therefore, she pretended to agree, saying she needed to prepare, but escaped instead. She came here, deciding to die to preserve her innocence. She wore the wedding dress, partly to reminisce about her husband's tenderness and protection during their honeymoon, and partly to express her determination with the blood-red color. But she hadn't managed to die, and Jeang Yuankai had even chased her here. She didn't want to fall into the hands of this vile ruffian. Being violated by such a man would be worse than death for her. Jeang Yuankai had a smile on his face. He loved this feeling of having strength and being in control. It was his favorite thing, right alongside beautiful women. He first swept his greedy gaze over Shiruaji, very satisfied with her in the wedding dress. He loved playing the role of a conquering villain, and toying with her in a wedding dress would be even more exciting. Then he looked at Sun Limin. "Are you going to kneel or not?" Sun Limin cursed inwardly. "Talk of the devil, and he appears. Is it that hard for me to act tough for once?" "Kneel to your sister," he roared, already preparing to activate his Esper power to conceal himself, Xiao Ran, and Shiruaji. But this was a snowfield. Any movement would leave footprints. But if they didn't move, wouldn't they be easily found? How awkward. Xiao Ran didn't let Jeang Yuankai act arrogant for long. He didn't even look at the man. Instead, he said to Zhang Rongmin, "Your mouth is full of righteousness and sacrifice. What if my strength is greater, and I happen to like men, and I've taken a fancy to you now? Are you willing to make a sacrifice?" Zhang Rongmin's face changed. Wasn't this cornering him, slapping his own face? But with Jeang Yuankai right beside him, what did he have to fear? "Of course. I am willing to sacrifice myself," he said righteously. Xiao Ran smiled faintly. "You said it." Jeang Yuankai was not happy. "I'm the one showing off here. Who the hell are you to steal my thunder?" He waved his hand, and 3 wind blades slashed toward Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran opened a space gate. Boom! Several large fireballs shot toward Jeang Yuankai. This was a feint. The air blades that attacked were naturally consumed by the space gate with ease, while Jeang Yuankai, quite formidable himself, let out a soft shout. A great wind swirled around him, effortlessly extinguishing the large fireballs. Jeang Yuankai frowned. Judging by the intensity of the fireballs, Xiao Ran's ability level was very low, about the same as one of his own fire ability subordinates. However, if Xiao Ran was only at this level, those 3 air blades should have already sliced him into several pieces. This was strange. Low attack and high defense? This was completely inconsistent with the characteristics of a fire-type ability user. How odd. Although Jeang Yuankai was arrogant and lecherous, if he were just a reckless brute, how could he have become the leader of a major faction? Fools died long ago. He stared at Xiao Ran, and after a moment, he actually smiled, as if Xiao Ran were a long-lost old friend he was about to rush over and embrace. I am Jeang Yuankai, the unworthy leader of the Buyuan settlement. And how should I address you, brother? Where are you from? To be able to block his attack was enough to prove that Xiao Ran's strength was extraordinary, even bizarre. Against an unfathomable opponent, Jeang Yuankai was always cautious. He was no longer a lone wolf. He had a huge establishment and countless beauties at home. So, why should he take a risk for a single woman? If it turned out that Xiao Ran's strength was no less than his own, or even just slightly inferior, and killing him would result in his own injury, then Jeang Yuankai would rather temporarily give up on Shu Ruaji and wait until he brought his subordinates to make a comeback. Let the subordinates go first. If they died, even better. Their abilities could be absorbed anyway, so not only would he not lose anything, he would profit greatly. Xiao Ran, however, didn't give him a shred of courtesy. Are you even worthy of asking my name? Fight if you want to fight, or get lost if you don't. This was a complete loss of face. Jeang Yuankai was naturally furious. As fellow magnates, if it were Wu Shanglong or Shan Mingfei, they would have definitely started fighting with Xiao Ran by now. One could lose a fight, but one could not lose their imposing manner. But Jeang Yuankai was different. He had always been cautious and never fought a battle he wasn't confident of winning. The main reason was that the way Xiao Ran had neutralized his attack was too strange, making him wary. If Xiao Ran had been even slightly weaker, he would have killed him directly instead of making a temporary retreat. Haha, what arrogance! Jeang Yuankai said, "This is the apocalypse. People who are too arrogant tend to die easily. I'll let you off for today." Whoosh! A strong wind rose, and he instantly vanished. What the hell? You, the leader of one of the 6 major factions, just made one move and then ran away? How could you be such a coward? Not only was Zhang Rongmin dumbfounded, but even Sun Limin hadn't expected to be able to act tough in front of Magnate and survive with all his limbs intact. It was truly a rare sight. Shu Ruaji's eyes, however, were shining brightly. Suddenly, she no longer wanted to die. If she could live, why die? She had been about to end her own life, partly out of disappointment in her husband and partly because there was truly no hope of survival. As long as she lived, her husband would give her to Jeang Yuankai, a fate worse than death. But now, Jeang Yuankai had actually been forced to retreat. Why should she die then? Zhang Rongmin was extremely embarrassed, caught in a dilemma. In his eyes, Jeang Yuankai was a magnate he could only look up to. So, with a single word from Jeang Yuankai, he had gritted his teeth and offered up his beloved wife. But now, Jeang Yuankai had run away on his own. How was he supposed to face this? Xiao Ran smiled and said to Zhang Rongmin, "What do you say?" Zhang Rongmin's face turned beet red, like a monkey's backside. Xiao Ran had previously said that if he were stronger than Jeang Yuankai and took a liking to him, would he sacrifice himself for his family? "Teach this, big brother. You must be joking," he said with a trembling voice. The thought of a strong man forcing himself upon another man made him feel nauseous. "What do you think?" Xiao Ran said coolly. His acting skills were now so refined that others couldn't tell from his expression whether he was being serious or not. Zhang Rongmin's face alternated between red and white as he underwent a fierce internal struggle. Finally, he gritted his teeth, veins popping on his forehead, and said, "As a man, I will never accept such humiliation." He would rather die fighting. Xiao Ran couldn't help but laugh. So the double standard was starting now. Shu Ruaji snorted and said, "Zhang Rongmin, why aren't you talking about protecting your family now? Men and women are different." Zhang Rongmin was still trying to argue. Since ancient times, there have been brothels where only women sell their bodies. Where have you ever seen a man do such a thing? Shu Ruaji was too angry to argue with him. It was useless. This man was selfish, only thinking about letting others make sacrifices. How had she fallen in love with someone like this? Right? It used to be an era of peace where human nature wasn't tested. And in the early days of the apocalypse, Zhang Rongmin was one of the lucky ones who had actually gained an ability. So, their family had lived a smooth life without experiencing hardships or facing life and death tests. Until now, the moment Jeang Yuankai threatened him, Zhang Rongmin revealed his true nature. Utterly disappointed, she was filled with self-loathing, hating both Zhang Rongmin's selfishness and her own failure to see clearly, only now recognizing the true face of this scumbag. For a moment, she was filled with a twisted desire for revenge. She asked Zhang Rongmin, "Do you still love me? Does it even need to be said?" Zhang Rongmin said, without hesitation, "I love you. I love you to the bone. You have to believe me. When I made that decision earlier, I was actually in more pain than you were." Hearing Shu Ruaji ask this, he thought the woman's heart had softened and she was having a change of heart. However, while it was true that he loved his wife, it was far less than how much he loved himself. Shu Ruaji ignored him and instead looked at Xiao Ran, a bewitching and morbidly seductive smile on her face. "Want to play with someone else's wife? Damn it. Couldn't you ask me this in private? I still have a subordinate here." And in his mind, "I'm a hero." Xiao Ran looked at Sun Limin. "Go take a walk somewhere. The following content is not suitable for children." Sun Limin protested. "I'm already over 18. I'm 22 this year. A virgin chicken." Xiao Ran said with contempt. Hit by such a devastating blow, Sun Limin could only run away dejectedly. Who could he blame for being a virgin chicken? Now, only 3 people remained. Shu Ruaji wore a morbidly seductive smile. Coupled with the fact that she was indeed running a fever, her cheeks were astonishingly red. Dressed in a bright red wedding gown, she gave off the vibe of a crazed beauty. "Right here," she said. "Not bad. I don't want to live anymore anyway. Just let me ascend in ecstasy." "No," Zhang Rongmin roared. "You slut. How can you be so promiscuous?" Interesting. He could give his own wife to someone else to play with, but Shu Ruaji had to be unwilling, otherwise she was promiscuous. Even Xiao Ran couldn't help but smile. "Buddy, you've really mastered the double standard." "Not here. Let's find a hotel," he said. "No, absolutely not." Zhang Rongmin roared, running over to grab Shu Ruaji and take her back. But Xiao Ran had already swept Shu Ruaji into his arms and was striding away. Zhang Rongmin hurriedly gave chase, but even though he was running with all his might, Xiao Ran seemed to be taking a leisurely stroll. Yet, he could never shorten the distance between them, at best only managing to maintain the same gap. At this moment, he didn't even consider the power difference between himself and Xiao Ran. He had only one thought: absolutely not allowed. Xiao Ran soon turned into a hotel. Zhang Rongmin, burning with rage, followed without hesitation. Clang! He chased them to the 3rd floor, just in time to see Xiao Ran carry Shu Ruaji into a room. Moreover, Xiao Ran hooked the door with his foot and kicked it shut. He rushed forward, wanting to push the door open, but just as his hand reached out, a strong chill suddenly rose within him. Extremely dangerous. He would die. A space gate was open right against the door. His outstretched hand stopped abruptly. An intense chill enveloped his heart, and reason instantly took over. He quickly calmed down, remembering that even Jeang Yuankai had been scared off by Xiao Ran. Yet here he was, daring to tail him to this place. It was like a long-lived man hanging himself. He was tired of living. Zhang Rongmin gritted his teeth, turned, and ran. His anger had subsided, replaced by a greater fear of death. If he didn't run now, he wouldn't have a chance after Xiao Ran was done. Besides, every man was different. Some could go for 30 minutes, while others finished in 3. He was afraid Xiao Ran was the latter. But just as he turned around, his vision went black, and he instantly lost consciousness. Thump! He fell hard, but since the hotel corridor was carpeted, the sound of his fall was very faint. His brain had been shredded by spatial cutting. He was completely and utterly dead. The room was incredibly intense. When he first entered, Xiao Ran had only wanted to tease Zhang Rongmin, to make him anxious. He hadn't really intended to do the deed. After all, he had eaten his fill just this morning and truly had no interest right now. He didn't, but Shu Ruaji did. When a top-tier beauty actively throws herself at you, and she's just an ordinary person with her abilities still in the process of awakening, posing no threat if Xiao Ran were to still push her away. Hith. He reluctantly enjoyed the experience. Half an hour later, Shu Ruaji fell into a deep sleep. She had already been in a high fever and unconscious, only waking up due to Zhang Rongmin's provocation. After such a wild session, she naturally couldn't hold on any longer and passed out. Now, no matter what one did to her, she wouldn't wake up. Xiao Ran had already gotten dressed. Looking at the bright red wedding gown scattered on the floor, he couldn't help but smile slightly. Should he keep this woman? Of course he would. There was no reason to push away a top-tier beauty. Xiao Ran observed Shu Ruaji's evolution process. A mysterious, yet familiar power was circulating within her body. With each circulation throughout her body, the strength of her cells increased a notch, and a strange power was also being generated. That should be her ability, though he didn't know what type. Xiao Ran carefully observed the entire process. In past evolutions, the first 10 days were all a gestation period with no activity at all. But once the energy seed formed, it would immediately shatter, and the ability would be produced so quickly it was startling, making it impossible to deduce the process of ability generation. It was different now. Although the process from start to finish was only a day, or even less, it was all substance, with no filler. What he witnessed was all-important data. But, even though Xiao Ran watched very, very carefully, he couldn't make any sense of it. Unconsciously, the sky had turned dark. Xiao Ran stood up. Very few people could move about outside at night, and Shu Ruaji was indoors, not outdoors, so the chances of her being discovered were extremely low. He left with peace of mind and headed in the direction of the Black Dragon Society's base. I'll let you guys have a good rest last night. I won't be so easy on you today. Just over 10 minutes later, Xiao Ran arrived outside the residential complex where the Black Dragon Society was located. The fog was thick, perfect for him to sneak in and kill. Under his spatial perception, the entire enemy's defensive layout held no secrets for him. Where the hidden sentries were, where the traps were, where the warning systems were set up, he knew it all crystal clear. Playing against a cheater like him who had the whole map revealed, any arrangement was essentially an open move. Xiao Ran vaulted over the wall and entered, avoiding traps and the warning system along the way. It was very simple and primitive, just a thin string with a bell tied to it. The slightest touch would cause it to jingle, triggering a louder alarm and waking up everyone in the Black Dragon Society. Today, he would start directly with the small fry. Xiao Ran locked onto a little Jap. He was sleeping with a woman in his arms. Xiao Ran sent a spatial cut straight down, and the man was instantly killed. So what if he had a crisis premonition? It depended on who the opponent was. Xiao Ran then used a spatial swap, exchanging the dead Jap out and storing him in his alternate space. Next, Xiao Ran repeated the process. Aside from the 3 leaders, Otoshiri and his 2 companions, plus the 5 war generals, none of the little Japs here were actually strong. Most were at the 3 or 5 unit level, and those over 20 units were few and far between. So, when they were targeted, swapped, and taken away by Xiao Ran, they had no reaction at all. It was over too quickly. The person was gone the moment the crisis premonition started. A premonition for nothing. However, after taking 21 people in a row, a problem occurred with the 22nd Jap. This person was a beast type, and a bird type at that. The key was that he happened to wake up just as he was being swapped. The moment he appeared in front of Xiao Ran, he immediately transformed, wildly flapping his 2 wings. Although Xiao Ran immediately used spatial compression to stuff him into the space gate, the strong wind generated by the flapping of his wings triggered the alarm. Ding, ding, ding. The bells on the thin string rang incessantly. Then, the entire Black Dragon Society was alerted. That windblower ability user acted immediately, dispersing the thick fog in the residential complex, while searchlights swung around wildly, looking for the intruder. Within a few seconds, they were aimed at Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran, however, used this bit of time to collect a few more Japs. 23, 24, 25, 26. Chao Xining. Otoshiri's non-standard Mandarin roared, followed by a blazing blade light. Xiao Ran first collected the blade energy, then used a spatial swap to leave. Someone was sending him bullets. Why not accept them? Hi, Chao, we'll be back tomorrow night. Little Japs, wash your necks and wait for death. Xiao Ran laughed heartily and swaggered away. The 8 powerhouses of the Black Dragon Society pursued him together, but there were too many buildings in the city. Every time Xiao Ran used a spatial swap, he selected an object inside a building, so he was always moving through buildings. How were Otoshiri's group of 8 supposed to find him? The Black Dragon Society did have reconnaissance-type ability users, but they were not one of the 8 powerhouses. So, after chasing for a while, the 8 Japs had to return, lest Xiao Ran was luring the tiger away from its mountain to wreak havoc in their base again. The Great Black Dragon Society, the #1 faction in High City, had been harassed by a single person for 2 consecutive nights. In just 3 days, how many people had died at Xiao Ran's hands? That bastard Xiao, I'm going to dig up your ancestral graves. Oda, Shiri screamed in anger. Xiao Ran retreated. Today's harvest was good, and he was quite satisfied. Returning to the hotel where Shuruaji was, he took a look. The woman was still in a high fever, but her physical fitness had grown a bit stronger. He lay down to sleep in his clothes. A night passed. Xiao Ran woke up and first checked on Shuruaji's condition. She was still feverish, but the mysterious energy in her body was nearly depleted. Based on Su Shinron's experience, she should be waking up soon. He would wait. He washed up and then took out some food to eat, all taken from his alternate space. On a whim, he ate loasafen. As everyone knows, this stuff's fragrance can travel for miles. When one family eats it, the whole village can smell it. People who dislike it loathe it, while those who love it will drool if they don't eat it for a few days. How strong was this smell? It was so strong it woke Shuruaji up. She woke up, propped herself up, and seeing Xiao Ran eating with gusto, she blurted out, "Are you eating shit? What the hell? Hurry up and apologize to the people of Guangxi province. Haha, I always thought loasafen was from Fujian." Xiao Ran chuckled, "I'm not a dog, so I don't have the habit of eating shit." Unexpectedly, Shuruaji then said, "Give me a bite." "Huh, weren't you just disgusted by it?" Xiao Ran, "I've already eaten from it. You don't mind?" Shuruaji gave him a seductive eye roll. "What haven't I eaten of yours before? What's the big deal about eating something you've eaten from?" Xiao Ran still passed the bowl over. This woman's emotions must still be a bit out of control, otherwise she probably wouldn't say such things. Sure enough, Shuruaji showed no disgust at all and immediately started eating. After 2 bites, she said, "This thing smells bad to those who smell it, but tastes good to those who eat it." "So you eat, and I get to smell it?" Xiao Ran was speechless. Shuruaji took 2 more bites, put down her chopsticks, and said, "It's not strange that you can find the loasafen, but how did you cook the noodles? Even if there's a gas stove and an induction cooker here, the gas and electricity should be off. How did you cook it?" Xiao Ran looked at her with some surprise. "Who said women with big chests are brainless? You can take your time making up a story." Shuruaji put down the bowl. How could Xiao Ran be cornered by a woman? He said, "Isn't your husband an ability user? Isn't it normal for ability users to have some strange skills?" "First, I have nothing to do with that person anymore." Shuruaji held up 1 finger, then a second. "Second, I also know a thing or 2 about ability users. They all enhance their physical fitness and possess superpower-like abilities, but that does not include conjuring a bowl of steaming hot loasafen out of thin air." Xiao Ran smiled slightly. "You are now one of the ability users." "Ah." Shuruaji was stunned. "How is that possible?" Xiao Ran laughed. "It's so cold right now. If you hadn't awakened an ability, would you not feel cold like this?" Shuruaji looked down and couldn't help but cry out in surprise, quickly hiding back in the bed and wrapping herself tightly in the quilt. "Yo, why are you suddenly so shy now?" Shuruaji poked her head out and asked, "I have an ability." "Feel it for yourself," Xiao Ran said casually. The mysterious energy in her body was already on the verge of depletion, and at this moment, it completely hit 0. So, her evolution was complete. Shuruaji's attention was immediately diverted, and she began to sense it. A moment later, boom, the quilt wrapped around her burst into flames, scaring her so much that she jumped off the bed. Xiao Ran didn't intervene, just watching it all, appreciating a beauty performing human body art. A beauty like jade, wreathed in fierce flames. Her charm was multiplied. Shuruaji stopped jumping after a while. She found that the flames couldn't harm her in the slightest. "I have fire abilities," she said, lacking confidence. Xiao Ran nodded. Her current physical fitness was equivalent to absorbing 3 units of ability strength. Considering that the body's enhancement isn't completed in a single day, this was clearly not the maximum. But she was clearly not as good as Su Shinron. She would probably stabilize at around 6 units. What did this mean? The mysterious energy contained in the golden snowflakes, or rather that golden substance, was of a variable quantity. There was more, and there was less. Could it be possible to directly create a 1,000-unit powerhouse? Or even 10,000 units? Damn it, that would be too unfair. Thinking of the word fair, Xiao Ran couldn't help but laugh. Talking about fairness now? What a joke. Besides, the largest amount of golden substance so far was only about 10 units. The sample size was too small to make a judgment, but he believed the possibility of jumping from 10 units to 1,000 or 10,000 was slim. But what if someone was extremely lucky and kept encountering golden snowflakes? Accumulating 5 or 10 units at a time would still be quite terrifying. An idea struck Xiao Ran, and he threw out the corpse of a little Jap from his alternate space. Ah! Shuraji immediately cried out, her face filled with fear. Although it had been over 100 days since the apocalypse began, she had been well protected and had rarely seen dead people. Even if she had, it was from a great distance. Now, having a dead person suddenly thrown in front of her, how could she not be terrified? It had only been a few minutes since she became an ability user. Her mindset had not yet transitioned at all. Xiao Ran said coolly, "This is a little Jap I killed. He was also an ability user. Touch him with your hand." Do I have to?" Shu Ruaji asked weakly, her face full of resistance. Xiao Ran nodded. Although Shu Ruaji was filled with reluctance, she didn't dare to disobey. Her hand slowly, tremblingly reached out. She touched it. Instantly, a warm current surged into her body, making her feel as if she had been electrocuted. She quickly retracted her hand. Xiao Ran then reached out and pressed on the little Jap's corpse. Sure enough, no warm current came. It was confirmed. Ability users awakened by golden snowflakes could be enhanced just like other ability users, no different at all. What was that? Shu Ruaji was still asking. Xiao Ran briefly explained. Shu Ruaji was both surprised and delighted. She had a vague understanding that ability users could absorb abilities after they died. After all, Zhang Rongmin had also absorbed the abilities of several people, so she had heard something about it. Zhang Rongmin had said that if he could absorb a large number of these abilities, he wouldn't have to worry about the likes of Jeang Yuankai. This showed how precious abilities were. But Xiao Ran had casually thrown one for her to absorb. She was a bit surprised, a bit incredulous, and a bit touched, but in the end, she gave a self-deprecating laugh. Is this considered a payment for my services? Sure enough, this woman's mental state was not right, a bit like Han Yun in her blackened state back then. When a woman is betrayed by her husband, the deeper the love, the heavier the wound, and the more abnormal and erratic her mental state becomes. Come on, I'll take you to a place. You can stay there for now, and I'll find a new place for you later. Xiao Ran stopped abruptly, because he had forgotten something. Although people awakened by the golden substance didn't have side effects, hadn't Shu Ruaji just absorbed the ability of one ability user? This didn't have side effects either. Xiao Ran thought for a moment. Throughout all the little Japs he had hunted before, had her absorb their abilities and then toss them one by one into the next room, waiting for the side effects to occur. Since we have to do it anyway, might as well kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Shu Ruaji was incredibly surprised. Xiao Ran had disappeared for a little while and had killed so many people. They're all little Japs, Xiao Ran explained. Shu Ruaji wasn't exactly a nationalist. While she had no fondness for the Japs, she didn't harbor a deep-seated hatred either. She just nodded. A moment later, her face began to turn red, and her eyes became extremely seductive. Here it comes, here it comes. Xiao Ran nodded, proving another point. Ability users created by the golden substance were only different during their creation. Once an ability user's evolution was complete, they were exactly the same from then on. This wave lasted until noon. Shu Ruaji no longer wore the wedding dress, but changed into normal winter clothes that Xiao Ran took out from his alternate space. She also understood where that steaming bowl of Velocifen had come from, and was both shocked and amazed. Your ability is definitely the most practical in the apocalypse, she said. It was more than just practical. It was both offensive and defensive, with almost no weaknesses. Xiao Ran didn't boast. You may know my strengths and weaknesses, but I have to keep some other secrets, right? After lunch, Xiao Ran took her to the Jung-an settlement. The cold wind was still biting, but Shu Ruaji was completely unafraid. Firstly, her physique had been greatly enhanced. Secondly, she was a fire tribute ability user, and could counter the severe cold by using a little of her ability. If she had enough ability power, she could even get away with not wearing winter clothes and just a summer dress. But if her ability power were really that high, her body would have long been enhanced to the point of not fearing temperatures of 100 degrees below zero, and she could walk freely in even harsher environments without using her ability. The two walked along, and Shu Ruaji would occasionally glance at Xiao Ran, her eyes somewhat complex. Yesterday, she and Xiao Ran were complete strangers, but now, not only had they had several intimate encounters, but they also knew each other's secrets. This effectively tied the two of them together. She didn't think for a moment that if she proposed to leave Xiao Ran now, he would let her go peacefully. This man was definitely not a saint. Moreover, knowing that Xiao Ran possessed a large amount of supplies, could she even leave? It was just that following a strange man like this really went against her life principles, so she was now full of contradictions. Xiao Ran didn't say anything, appearing very silent along the way. About half an hour later, they arrived at the Jung-an settlement. The sentry immediately let them pass. Xiao Ran led Shu Ruaji inside, and Wong Tai soon came out. Upon learning that Shu Ruaji was an ability user, he naturally expressed his welcome. But when he heard Xiao Ran say they would only be staying for a few days, he naturally seemed very disappointed. A while later, Sun Limin came over. When he found Shu Ruaji with Xiao Ran, he was both surprised and relieved. Xiao Ran could understand the surprise, but what did he mean by being relieved? Sun Limin stammered out an explanation. Yesterday, I really thought Big Brother Xiao was gay. I was worried for a long time. What the hell? Xiao Ran almost slapped him. What were you worried about? Did you think I would make a move on you? Shu Ruaji covered her mouth and laughed, but as she laughed, her brow furrowed again, looking worried, like a melancholic beauty, evoking pity. Big Brother Xiao, did you know the little Japs have gone crazy? Sun Limin suddenly said. It was normal. He had killed many of their ability users for 2 consecutive nights. How could they not go crazy? However, the one who did the killing was Chao Xining. What did it have to do with him, Xiao Ran? Oh, he feigned curiosity. Sun Limin nodded, his face full of anger. The brothers who went to scout the Black Dragon Society this morning came back and said that the Japs have hung 52 heads at the entrance of their complex and wrote in blood on the snow. Chao Xining, if you dare to kill again tonight, for everyone you kill, we will kill 2 Chinese people. Tell me, isn't this Chao Xining amazing? He killed 26 of the Japs and still got away completely unharmed. I really want to meet this badass. In addition to his anger, his face was also full of admiration. Shu Ruaji couldn't help but glance at Xiao Ran. In the morning, Xiao Ran had thrown out a total of 26 corpses and said they were all little Japs, so Xiao Ran was Chao Xining. She then looked at Sun Limin, a slight smile on her face. You're showering the man himself with effusive praise, and it's all from the heart. Xiao Ran must be secretly gloating like crazy. Sure enough, there was a faint smile on Xiao Ran's face. He said, the Japs are already this hysterical? To actually use ordinary people to threaten him. They were at their wits' end. It made sense. Xiao Ran could come and go as he pleased. What could the Japs do? They could only bark impotently like that. Counting it up, it had only been 3 days, and he had already killed 88 of the Japs. The entire Black Dragon Society had just over 300 people. Although the 88 were all small fry, it was enough to make Oda Shiri feel the pain. No, if you included Duan Chong. Sun Limin nodded repeatedly. The Japs are too despicable. Sigh, if only I had Chao Xining's strength, I would go find trouble with the Japs too and wipe them out sooner or later. Xiao Ran glanced at him and nodded. If you become 1,000 times stronger, you still have a good chance. His ability was to create illusions. If he became 1,000 times stronger, could he get close to a master like Oda Shiri without the latter knowing? By then, his own strength would have reached an astonishing level. One slash, and Oda Shiri would surely die. Sun Limin was dumbfounded, saying feebly, Big Brother Xiao, am I that weak right now? Xiao Ran patted his shoulder. Keep it up, young man. Sun Limin left, looking as if he had been injected with chicken blood, determined to make himself stronger. As soon as he left, Lin Xiao and her 2 friends actually came over. They still hadn't given up. Big Brother Xiao, the 3 women approached, just about to put on another sob story when they saw Shu Ruaji. It had to be said, women are particularly sensitive in this regard. Lin Xiao and her friend simultaneously showed strong hostility towards Shu Ruaji. But Shu Ruaji was on a much higher level. She just gently linked her arm with Xiao Ran's, adopting a delicate, dependent posture. In terms of looks, Shu Ruaji crushed them. In terms of figure, Shu Ruaji crushed them. The 3 women didn't even finish their sentence before they ran away dejectedly. They probably wouldn't dare to come looking for Xiao Ran again, unless they wanted to humiliate themselves further. Shu Ruaji smiled triumphantly. She was still very confident in her charm, but after smiling, her willow-like eyebrows furrowed again, looking very melancholic. She had just been betrayed by her husband yesterday and had failed to die. It would be strange if she could forget about it so quickly. Xiao Ran had great confidence in the retired soldiers here. They were not fake soldiers like Duan Chong. In fact, how many ability users were there now who could still eat and live together with ordinary people? It was probably just them. Xiao Ran truly admired their ability to hold onto their principles without wavering. The afternoon quickly passed. Night fell. Xiao Ran smiled slightly. It was time for him to act. Wait for me to come back, he said to Shuruaji. You're going again? Shuruaji was very shocked. The thick fog was a natural deterrent for any ability user. Even a wind-type user could only disperse the fog for a short time. How long could they last? At most, they could only operate in a small area. Xiao Ran nodded. If I don't kill a Jap for a day, I feel restless all over. He used spatial swap. Whoosh, a living person disappeared, replaced by a withered leaf. Xiao Ran used spatial swap 3 consecutive times to leave the Jung-an settlement's complex, then ran on his own 2 legs towards the Black Dragon Society. In less than 10 minutes, he arrived. He hadn't used his full speed. This was fast enough. The entire complex was brightly lit. TSK, TSK. Is this how you waste free energy? Xiao Ran believed that there were definitely sentry-type ability users who were not asleep, but were monitoring the entire complex. Once they discovered his arrival, they would sound the alarm, and the experts would rush out to stop him. No problem. Xiao Ran once again used spatial swap, instantly killing his way in, and then swapped a little Jap in front of him. Collect. However, he was immediately discovered, and alarms blared. Then, it returned to last night's rhythm. The Japs all rushed out, especially the 8 powerhouses, who attacked Xiao Ran from different directions. Kill you, you bastard. Xiao Ran smiled slightly and opened his spatial domain. I'll continue killing. Whoosh, 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 more Japs were swapped out by him and then thrown into his alternate space. But what about the incoming attacks? All attacks from one direction were absorbed by the space gate. The attacks from the other direction, although not immediately absorbed, slowed down instantly upon entering the spatial domain. This was the effect Xiao Ran wanted. He then moved the space gate to a different direction and naturally absorbed the attacks from this side as well. However, when those attacks crashed into his domain, Xiao Ran's ability consumption soared. He could have originally used it for about 15 minutes, but now it was only 14. Just that one exchange had consumed nearly 7% of his ability. Damn, a miscalculation. So neutralizing attacks with the spatial domain consumed so much ability. It made sense. This was a direct confrontation. The enemies were numerous and not weak. A head-on clash would naturally have this result. Xiao Ran nodded and decisively switched to using banishment on himself. Then, he began collecting Japs under the enemy's hail of fire. 5, 6, 7. Countless attacks flew at him. Half were immediately absorbed by the space gate, while the other half passed through Xiao Ran's body. They flew a short distance before being absorbed by the space gate again. Everyone stop! Let me handle this! Oda Shiri roared. This was clearly not right. He couldn't let Xiao Ran continue to absorb attacks, or else if he suddenly returned them, the entire camp would be destroyed in an instant. Oda Shiri charged over, immediately entering his beast form. His speed skyrocketed. At this moment, he was equivalent to a martial arts type of the same level, possessing the same strength, speed, and reaction, but also having the unique abilities of a beast type. He instantly appeared in front of Xiao Ran and slashed at him when he was completely unprepared. Swish, the blade light streaked by like a flash of lightning in the long night. But despite such a fierce slash, Xiao Ran was unharmed. On the contrary, Oda Shiri, having cut through empty air, immediately lost control of his body and almost plunged headfirst into the space gate. Fortunately, he managed to flap his wings in time to stabilize himself. Just then, Xiao Ran swapped another little Jap over. Oda Shiri's eyes turned cold. He slashed again, but not at Xiao Ran, but at this little Jap. One slash, and the Jap was instantly killed. The advantage of a beast type was fully displayed as he grabbed the Jap's corpse before it could fall into the space gate and absorb the ability himself. Better for me than for you, vicious and decisive. Everyone fall back, Oda Shiri shouted loudly. The little Japs immediately retreated one after another. Only experts like Sakura Ko and Ozawa Taro closed in. Now, even if Xiao Ran used spatial swap again, he could only target these experts, and these experts each had their own methods and were not particularly afraid of Xiao Ran's combo of swapping and then stuffing them into a space gate. When the same trick is used too many times, people will eventually find a way to counter and neutralize it. Xiao Ran smiled. You all seem to have forgotten one thing. The 8 of them didn't attack, knowing it would be useless. Xiao Ran seemed to be in an invincible state, but they believed this invincible state could not possibly last forever. This was a fact. However, was this the only trick I have? Xiao Ran deactivated banishment and simultaneously activated spatial swap. He instantly appeared 100 meters away, and a rock suddenly fell where he had been standing. Crap! Oda Shiri and the other 7 all cursed in their hearts. They turned their heads and saw that Xiao Ran had already cut into the group of retreating Japs. He didn't even need to use spatial swap anymore, directly using spatial cutting to instantly kill a dozen people. Then he moved like lightning, collecting all their abilities. Bakayuru, Odashiri, and the other 7 were furious. Xiao Ran wouldn't fight them head-on at all, just using guerrilla tactics to constantly wear down their effective forces, and there was nothing they could do about it. Chao Xining, if you don't stop, I'll start killing the Chinese people here. Oda Shiri roared. Would Xiao Ran stop? Obviously not. Why? Even if he stopped, could the Chinese people who had fallen into the hands of these Japs survive? They were just experimental subjects used to generate abilities. Whether they succeeded or not, there was only death at the end of the experiment. Xiao Ran stops? At best, it would let them live a few more days. If it were Wu Shanglong, he might have obediently ceased hostilities. Letting people live an extra day might mean there could be a way to save them. But Xiao Ran had a completely different way of thinking. The Japs kill you, so I will avenge you. And Xiao Ran revealed a cold smile. His figure flashed, flash. He used spatial swap continuously, cutting to the front of a large building. Oda Shiri couldn't help but be greatly alarmed. This was the building he lived in. What did Xiao Ran want to do? Xiao Ran smiled slightly and used spatial swap again, but not on himself. Instead, it was on a person inside the building and a small pellet in his hand. Whoosh, a woman appeared in his arms. A very young, beautiful woman. Oda Shiri's daughter. Oda Shiri had already unleashed a slash, but he forcibly retracted it. The furious expression on his face turned to anxiety. Chao Xining, let her go. We can talk about this. No, I think it's better to have a chat with your daughter. Xiao Ran laughed and ran. The Japanese girl immediately cried out in Japanese. Father, save me. Save me. Oda Shiri's eyes sharpened. Not only did he run in pursuit, but he also unleashed a slash. The blade energy was sharp, the light brilliant, and it was incredibly ruthless. This slash was not to save his daughter, but to kill both her and Xiao Ran together. It had to be said, this little Jap was very decisive. He knew that holding back because a hostage would only allow Xiao Ran to abduct her. And seeing what happened to the Chinese women here, if his own daughter fell into Xiao Ran's hands, could she possibly have a good end? Rather than being defiled and bringing shame to his name, it was better for him to kill her with his own hands. Moreover, he could also test whether Xiao Ran's ability could be used on another person at the same time. Xiao Ran frowned. This Oda Shiri was really ruthless. He could use the space gate to absorb attacks, but he had to be stationary. Any movement would close the space gate. So, he had no choice but to use banishment on himself and the Japanese girl, letting the slash pass by. Then he quickly deactivated banishment and continued running. Oda Shiri gave chase, but just as he got within 100 meters of Xiao Ran, he was suddenly swapped to another location, still in a charging posture. His vision went black, and bang, he crashed through a wall, passing straight through. By the time he ran out from the wall, all he saw was a thick fog. Where could he see Xiao Ran anymore? Chao Xining, I'll FCK your whole family, he roared. His voice was so loud that it could be heard from more than 10 kilometers around, showing just how furious he was at that moment. Xiao Ran naturally heard it and couldn't help but laugh. Did this little Jap practice Chinese specifically for him? He'd even learned a national treasure of a curse like FCK your whole family. You're something else. He paid it no mind, took the Japanese girl to a nearby hotel, knocked her out, and tossed her onto the bed. Then he took out a storage battery to provide the necessary warmth. This woman couldn't die yet. Then he went out and headed back to Oda Shiri's place. You thought tonight was over just like that? Here's another surprise for you. Sure enough, Oda Shiri and the others had withdrawn their troops, but none of them were asleep. They were discussing countermeasures. They couldn't let this Chao Xining continue his killing spree, or else their men would be wiped out in a few days. Ruling a place depends on people. If they didn't have enough manpower, so what if they killed all the experts in High City? Without a large number of lower and middle-level personnel, how could they truly control a territory? Xiao Ran quietly infiltrated, using spatial swap continuously to once again approach the building where Oda Shiri lived. However, this time he was discovered before he could make a move. Instantly, the alarms blared. Xiao Ran smiled slightly, activated spatial swap, and whoosh, another woman appeared in his arms. Oda Shiri's wife. He didn't know which one she was, but she was very young. Chao Xining. Oda Shiri burst through a wall, his face ferocious. This was too much, way too much. First you abduct my daughter, then you abduct my wife. What the hell do you want? The thought of it sent a chill down his spine. But with the thick fog, the night was Xiao Ran's home ground. Did he dare to give chase? If he ran a certain distance, he would get lost, and then it would just be Xiao Ran attacking him while he could only passively defend. And everyone knew that the defending side was at a huge disadvantage because a single mistake meant it was over. No matter how angry or unwilling Oda was, he could only stay put. Tomorrow, we must activate the sand toxin plan, he said grimly. Xiao Ran brought Oda's young wife to the previous hotel. He tossed her aside and then woke up Oda's daughter. Although he couldn't trample Tokyo, blow up Mount Fuji, and cause a massive volcanic eruption to swallow the entire island nation right now, playing with some Japanese girls was something he could do immediately. Coincidentally, he had just killed over 30 little Japs. After absorbing their abilities, the 2 Japanese girls in front of him were just right for releasing the side effects. The 2 Japanese girls recovered from their initial shock and glared at Xiao Ran angrily. Let us go now. Otherwise, I'll have my father kill 100 Chinese people. 100 is too few. I'll have my husband kill 1,000 Chinese people. This mother-daughter pair, with a very small age gap and related only by law, were more ruthless than the other. They were already accustomed to treating Chinese people as consumables, not even considering them as lives. Xiao Ran was cold. While throwing out little Japs one by one to absorb their abilities, he also took out some camera equipment. He was going to learn from the Japs for once and film an adult video for Oda to enjoy. After all, both leading ladies were related to Oda, so, of course, the family should get to see a sample. How beautiful were these Japanese girls? In truth, they weren't that stunning, scoring 80-something points at most. Furthermore, Japanese women considered a set of uneven teeth to be beautiful, which clearly didn't align with Chinese aesthetics. So, the pleasure was mainly psychological. Because they were Japs. How many good men dreamed of trampling Tokyo? For now, that was impossible, but sleeping with a few Japanese girls could provide a little satisfaction. An hour later, Xiao Ran ignored the 2 Japanese girls. In this freezing weather, could they possibly run outside? Fine, if you're really that brave, go ahead. Xiao Ran had no intention of keeping them. They had committed evil in this country. Even if they hadn't killed anyone with their own hands, how could they claim to be innocent after feasting on so much human blood and suffering? Just based on their arrogant attitude earlier, it was clear how much they looked down on the Chinese and how little they regarded them as human. If they dared to run outside, Xiao Ran would only clap his hands and sit back to enjoy the show. After putting away the USB drive, Xiao Ran smiled slightly and left immediately. In a short while, he arrived at the Black Dragon Society. He swaggered in, immediately triggering the alarms. Then, the place erupted in a cacophony of voices. The Wind-type war general appeared and blew away the fog, and all the searchlights focused on Xiao Ran. Oda also appeared in front of Xiao Ran at the first moment, his face extremely ugly. Xiao Ran had absorbed abilities and had been gone for over 2 hours. What had he been doing? Did one even need to think? He must have gone to deal with the side effects. And how did he deal with them? Certainly not with his 5 fingers. So, his face was grim, his hands clenched in a tight fist, so angry he felt like he would vomit blood. Chao Xining, are you here for a decisive battle? He said coldly, his voice having a very distinct, clearly Japanese accent. Xiao Ran smiled slightly and threw a USB drive at Oda. Here, I just filmed a movie. I specially brought it over for you to see. Baka, Oda didn't catch it, but instead slashed at it. Crack. The small USB drive couldn't even withstand his blade energy, let alone a direct hit from his sword. It was instantly pulverized. Xiao Ran wasn't bothered. Oops, wrong one. That was a blank one. This is the real one. He threw another USB drive. Bastard. Oda slashed again. Crack. This USB drive also shattered. Xiao Ran shook his head. Why bother? What's done is done. Even if you bury your head in the sand like an ostrich, you can't change the facts. And, I've made many copies. Come, anyone interested can have one. With a casual toss, a large number of USB drives flew towards the crowd. This time, Oda didn't attack again. It was useless. This guy was very insidious. Even if he destroyed this batch of USB drives, how many more did he have in his hand? It didn't matter. All he had to do was kill this person. Very good, he said with a grim face. I said, for every person of mine you kill, I will kill double the number of Chinese people. Humph, I'll kill them right in front of you. Xiao Ran wasn't in a hurry, saying coolly, fine. For every person you kill, I'll slash your wife and daughter that many times. If I'm off by 1 slash, I'll take your damn surname. Bastard, Oda roared. They are civilians. Xiao Ran laughed. And the people you kill are not. So, it's ability user against ability user. If you insist on dragging ordinary people into this, it's not like I don't know how to kill either. Otoshiri couldn't help but hesitate. He could forget about his wife. He only married her for her youth and beauty, and there were no real feelings. But he only had one daughter. With his current physical condition, it was possible he could have more children, but it was also possible he couldn't. Moreover, the weather conditions were too harsh now. Adults were struggling to survive, so what about babies? At least 9 out of 10 would die in infancy. The Santoxin plan is about to begin. I'll endure it for now and let this Chinese guy be smug for another day. Otoshiri made his decision in his heart. They were just some ordinary people anyway. He could kill them anytime. Fine, I won't kill them, Otoshiri said grimly. However, if I find out you dare to touch my wife and daughter, I will kill 1,000, 10,000 Chinese people. That might be a bit difficult to do, since not only did I touch them, I tormented them for a long time. Xiao Ran smiled faintly. I'm sure you all won't be able to sleep for the rest of the night. So, enjoy the movie I filmed. After you finish watching, it'll be dawn. Huh. He swaggered away. In fact, the USB drives he had taken out were all blank. Unless he had enough time to mosaic his own face, he wasn't so bold as to let a bunch of people admire his heroic posture. This was just to humiliate Otoshiri. He returned to the hotel. A scan with his spatial perception revealed that the 2 Japanese girls had moved to a different room and were hiding in a closet, clearly avoiding him. Xiao Ran had no side effects right now and couldn't be bothered to drag them out. You like to hide? Then keep hiding in fear. He found a random room and went to sleep, very peacefully. However, just 2 hours later, the sky began to brighten. Xiao Ran washed up briefly and then started eating breakfast. He did on purpose, eating hot pot. When it came to a boil, the fragrant aroma wafted out. The key was that Xiao Ran had deliberately opened the door to the room where the 2 Japanese girls were, allowing the aroma to drift in easily. Haha, you must be hungry by now. Let's see how long you can hold out. He had clearly overestimated the resistance of these 2 women. Just 10 minutes later, he saw the 2 of them walk over on their own. When they saw the hot pot cooking on the induction stove, especially with a large amount of ingredients laid out beside it, they couldn't help but swallow hard. Can you give us a little to eat? Otoshiri's daughter asked, her face full of longing. Xiao Ran chuckled. That depends on your performance. He ate the hot pot and had his fun. Xiao Ran paid no mind to the 2 women and went directly to the Jung-an settlement. Given the 2 women's condition, going outside was courting death. Even if, by some chance, they were found and taken back by Otoshiri, Xiao Ran couldn't care less. If he was interested, he'd just kidnap them again. If not, he'd kill them on a whim. It was of no consequence. A dozen or so minutes later, he arrived at the Jung-an settlement. When Shu Ruaji saw him return, she couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Although she was now an ability user, it had only been a short time, and she was far from completing the psychological transition. She was more accustomed to seeing herself as an ordinary, weak woman. Being in an unfamiliar place, she hadn't slept well all night, tossing and turning. Now that she finally saw Xiao Ran, she naturally felt a sense of security. Even though she and Xiao Ran weren't very familiar, because they had shared the most intimate of relationships, she had unknowingly developed a sense of dependence on him. Xiao Ran prepared a special meal for her, letting her have a feast. But the others in the settlement didn't have such good treatment. They gnawed on dry rations every day, supplemented with some vegetables grown by the settlement. Their living conditions could only be described as harsh. But at least they were still alive. Xiao Ran wasn't so generous as to treat everyone to a big meal of fish and meat. If it were just these retired soldiers, he wouldn't mind treating them to a good meal. But to also include trash like Lin Xiao Xiao, it was better to forget it. He gave Wong Tai a bag of frozen buns. Even so, Wong Tai thanked Xiao Ran profusely. In times like these, food was life. A bag of meat buns, even if frozen, could be eaten after heating up. He started chatting with Wong Tai. Brother Wong, have you ever seen golden snowflakes? Xiao Ran asked. He really wanted to know if the golden snowflakes had only recently started falling, or if it had been a long time ago. Wong Tai was stunned. You've seen them too? Huh? Xiao Ran had just asked casually, not expecting to get a lead. His spirits lifted. I just saw them 2 days ago. Where did you see them? Wong Tai counted on his fingers. It must have been nearly 3 months ago. But it wasn't me who saw them. It was our captain, and more than once. The captain he was referring to was Wu Shanlong. Holy crap. Was Wu Shanlong the chosen one? He had only seen the golden snowflakes once so far, but Wu Shanlong had not only seen them 3 months ago, but more than once. How could the gap between people be so big? Xiao Ran frowned. He had always thought that the strength of an ability could only be increased by killing other ability users. When estimating the strength and number of ability users, he would also use this as a standard. For example, if a city had 10 million people, then at a rate of 1 in 1,000, about 10,000 people could become ability users. The strongest among them would at most be equivalent to 10,000 units. High City had enough people, but it could only produce about 20,000 ability users, at most 20,000 units. So, as long as Xiao Ran's ability amount exceeded 1,000 to the city's total population, he would be the undisputed number 1 expert, right? But now, the appearance of the golden snowflakes told him that he couldn't calculate it that way. Although Qin Sujuan could create ability liquid, it couldn't be mass-produced and had little impact. So, it was really possible for some lucky person to become a 1,000 unit or 10,000 unit powerhouse without fighting a single battle. Ay. Xiao Ran rubbed his temples, feeling a bit of a headache. But before he could say anything, he heard an alarm sound outside. The Japs are here. Instantly, everyone rushed out. Xiao Ran didn't move, but while seemingly sitting indoors, he could see everything clearly. Otoshiri had arrived. He was leading the team personally, with Sakura Ko and Ozawa Taro by his sides. In addition, there were 5 of the 10 war generals and a large crowd of small fry. It was clear they had come out in full force. Was this for a decisive battle to wipe out the Jung-an settlement in one fell swoop? It was actually possible. A few days ago, Shen Mingfei had suddenly come over to propose a small alliance, then backstabbed their allies in the larger alliance, allowing the 2 of them to become dominant. After Shen Mingfei was surely rebuffed here, he would definitely go to the other 3 factions. Could this alliance continue to cooperate? Even if the other 3 factions received news of the Japs attacking the Jung-an settlement, would they possibly extend a helping hand? Wouldn't they suspect it was a trap? Shen Mingfei's little stunt had directly turned the 5 members of the alliance into a scattered mess. No, Xiao Ran showed a look of surprise, because he had detected another group of people. Although these people were sneaky, hiding their heads and tails, how could they possibly hide from Xiao Ran, who possessed spatial perception? He could see them too clearly. The leader of this group was none other than Shen Mingfei. Why was he here? Even if he still had a sense of mutual dependency, the Japs had just arrived, and he had brought his team over right on their heels? How was that possible? Then, there was only one other possibility. Shen Mingfei had colluded with the Japs. That was it. That's why he had deliberately come over a few days ago to propose an alliance with Wu Shanglong. That was a complete fake, intended to sow discord. If he went around to all 4 factions, wouldn't their alliance fall apart? Otherwise, even if Shen Mingfei joined the Japs, if Wu Shanglong and the other 3 factions united, they would at most be at a disadvantage, at most have a harder time, but not be completely helpless. It was different now. The Japs already had the advantage, an absolute one. Not only would the 3 factions not come to the rescue, but there was also Shen Mingfei, who would add insult to injury. How could the Jung-an settlement possibly defend against that? Xiao Ran suddenly understood. No wonder Otoshiri had so readily agreed not to harm the hostages last night. He was planning to wipe out the Jung-an settlement today, absorb Wu Shanglong's ability, and let his strength skyrocket. When he himself went for a night raid again, Otoshiri would crush him with thunderous power and solve the problem once and for all. His expression turned cold. He absolutely could not let the Japs succeed. And he could do it. For the past few days, hadn't he single-handedly thrown the Japs' base into chaos? Now, although it was daytime, he had the entire Jung-an settlement to help him, making up for the disadvantage of the daytime. He would not lose. At this time, Wu Shanglong had already led his men out. Although they were now facing the Japs alone and were at a complete disadvantage, neither Wu Shanglong nor Wong Tai, nor anyone else, showed any fear. Shu Ruaji appeared by Xiao Ran's side, looking out the window with a worried expression. She had long heard of the Japs' strength. Ha! From today onwards, there will be no more Jung-an settlement. Otoshiri said coldly. There was nothing more to say. He simply waved his hand, and his vast number of subordinates charged forward. Get back! Wu Shanglong roared, flames erupting from his entire body. He led the charge, like a god of war. However, he immediately staggered and violently spat out a mouthful of burning blood. This scene was unexpected by everyone. Wu Shanglong was the soul and pillar of the entire Jung-an settlement. If anything happened to him, the settlement's backbone would be broken. What happened? What on earth happened? Heh! Ozawa Taro let out a sinister laugh. In his hand, he held a straw doll. He gently bent the doll's arm, and Wu Shanglong, as if remotely controlled, had his left arm bent at an impossible angle. However, Wu Shanglong was a faction leader, after all. He fiercely released his ability again, the intensity of the flames around him increasing by a large margin, completely turning into fire. In this state, his body was no longer solid, but was made of flames. So, even if his arm was broken, it couldn't cause him any harm. Curse Master! Everyone understood and exclaimed in alarm. But, although Ozawataro's ability was terrifying, its power was not particularly great when cast out of thin air. Unless he had something from the target as a medium, like hair or skin, then he could play someone to death. But Wu Shanglong was always very careful when fighting the Japs. How could he possibly let them get his hair or skin tissue? There was only one possibility. A traitor. There must be a traitor. Wu Shanglong, however, didn't even glance behind him. He had complete confidence in his brothers and absolutely refused to believe that there could be a traitor among them. It's definitely not one of my brothers. Ha ha ha. Odashiri laughed loudly. Lord Wu, are you very curious as to why you were hit? He didn't mind saying a few more words. It wasn't to show off, but to let Ozawataro consume as much of Wu Shanglong's ability as possible. This way, the possibility of the other party escaping would be smaller. He wasn't here to occupy this settlement, but for Wu Shanglong's ability. He had to get it. Otherwise, his life would be too miserable. Why? Wu Shanglong asked in a deep voice, but his head involuntarily bent backward, almost falling off his shoulders. Fortunately, he was in a fire state now. With a surge of flames, his head returned to normal. Naturally, it was Ozawataro who had viciously twisted the head of the straw doll in his hand. Because of me, a voice came from the side. Everyone looked over and saw the tall figure of Shun Mingfei swaggering out of a building. He even glanced at Odashiri, saying with some displeasure, "You shouldn't have exposed me so quickly." "It doesn't matter," Odashiri said nonchalantly. "Your alliance has already collapsed. No one will come to support you. With the two of us joining forces, plus Lord Ozawa's containment, Wu Shanglong will absolutely not be able to escape." "Forget it, it's already happened." Shin Mingfei waved his hand, with an attitude of what's done is done, no point in pursuing it. Now, everyone suddenly understood. The traitor was Shun Mingfei. That's right, he had come over a few days ago, deliberately saying he wanted to form an alliance with Wu Shanglong, which angered Wu Shanglong. The two had even exchanged a move. Shin Mingfei must have plucked Wu Shanglong's hair or skin tissue then. This guy was so venomous. Are you even f***ing Chinese? Traitor, running dog. The people of the Jung-an settlement all cursed loudly, but a sense of despair quickly enveloped everyone. The Japs alone were already impossible to defeat, and now, with Shun Mingfei's forces added to the mix, they were bound to lose. They would be completely annihilated. But the next moment, their fighting spirit boiled over again. Then they would die on the battlefield. Wu Shanglong didn't even look at Shun Mingfei, as if disdaining to speak to such a vile person. He shouted loudly, "Wong Tai, here!" Wong Tai responded loudly and quickly walked to Wu Shanglong's side. Wu Shanglong turned his head and whispered quickly, "Their target is my ability. They must not get it. I am controlled by the Curse Master and cannot escape. Wong Tai, I order you. I will kill myself later. You immediately absorb my ability and leave." "Did you hear me?" He roared the last sentence. Wong Tai showed a look of struggle. After just a second, he shouted, "Mission guaranteed to be completed." A smile appeared on Wu Shanglong's face, but before he could react, he saw Wong Tai punch his own temple. "Captain, as long as you are strong enough, that Curse Master won't be able to control you. Avenge me." Although he was not a martial arts type, his strength had far surpassed that of an ordinary person after multiple enhancements. The temple was also one of the most vulnerable parts of the human body. With such a heavy blow, Wong Tai died instantly, but his body fell towards Wu Shanglong. In an instant, tears streamed down Wu Shanglong's face. But he didn't move an inch because Wong Tai had died for him. He could not fail him. Thump! The body crashed into him. Wu Shanglong's whole body trembled, and he let out a roar like that of a wounded, lone wolf, very suppressed and full of anger. Ha ha ha! But seeing this scene, Odashiri and the others just laughed loudly. "Naive, you think this will allow you to escape Lord Ozawa's control?" Odashiri sneered. To completely escape Ozawataro's control, one would need to at least double his ability amount. How much ability could a mere Wong Tai contribute? However, this was also good. The ability wouldn't disappear anyway, just transfer. It would save them some effort. Wu Shanglong turned his anger into killing intent. He roared and was about to charge out, but he saw Ozawataro show a contemptuous smile and punched the straw doll. Wu Shanglong was instantly hit as if by a heavy blow and stumbled back several steps without reason. This proved that he was still being controlled and suppressed by Ozawa Taro. Although it couldn't completely incapacitate him, it would greatly affect him. How much of his full combat power could he even use? Charge! In the Jung-an settlement, ability users ran towards Wu Shanglong one by one, their faces resolute. They wanted to follow Wong Tai's example. If one person's ability was not enough, then 2, 3, all of them would go. All of you, get the hell back. Wu Shanglong roared, flames surging, as if he had gone mad. Whoosh! Just then, a figure appeared out of thin air, followed by a steel bar flying out like a bolt of lightning. It was Xiao Ran. Wong Tai's suicide was too decisive and fast, so much so that Xiao Ran didn't have time to stop it. But this time, he certainly couldn't let others continue to die needlessly. They couldn't help Wu Shanglong, but he could spatial swap. Xiao Ran locked onto the supersonic steel bar he had just thrown, and then swapped it with the straw doll in Ozawa Taro's hand. It was as fast as lightning. Completely unprepared, Ozawa Taro saw the supersonic steel bar shooting towards his chest. He was not a martial arts type. How could he possibly block such a fierce attack? Just as he thought he would have to use a life-saving ability again, a hand reached out and firmly gripped the steel bar. It was Oda Shiri who had acted. Chow! Xin! Ning! Oda Shiri gritted his teeth, saying one word at a time. Xiao Ran casually tossed the straw doll to Wu Shanglong and smiled slightly. Hey, we meet again so soon. Wu Shanglong caught the straw doll. Boom! With a surge of flames, the straw doll was instantly incinerated. With that, he would no longer be constrained in the slightest. D! Wu Shanglong roared, once again charging towards the little Japs. Even at a time like this, he still vented his anger on the Japs first. When facing an external enemy, dealing with the traitor could wait. Although Oda Shiri was furious, feeling a sense of frustration from a near success, he still entered his beast form and charged to meet Wu Shanglong. Both were leaders of a faction, their strength incredibly formidable. A punch, a slash, with flames soaring to the sky and blade energy like electricity, they fought an earth-shattering battle. In terms of strength, Oda Shiri should still have the upper hand, as he had clearly absorbed more abilities. But Wu Shanglong possessed an incredibly high morale, and with the support of his anger, he had a burst of power, faintly suppressing Oda Shiri. For the time being, it was difficult for them to determine a victor. Xiao Ran smiled slightly. Although the Jap side had Shun Mingfei's group, he also had Wu Shanglong and others to help. With that addition and subtraction, it was the same situation as last night. What was there to fear? Who the hell are you bastard? Shun Mingfei was furious and flustered, roaring at Xiao Ran. If not for Xiao Ran's appearance, they could have killed Wu Shanglong by now, and easily at that. It was all because of Xiao Ran. Chao Xining, Sakura Keiko said in her clumsy Chinese. Shun Mingfei roared and charged at Xiao Ran. He hated this person to death. Lord Shun, be careful. Sakura Keiko quickly called out. She had suffered at Xiao Ran's hands and had almost died. Xiao Ran smiled, starting with a simple move. A small combo of spatial swap and a space gate. If it were just Shun Mingfei, Xiao Ran could have easily played this wingless beast type to death. But the Japs were not going to just watch them fight one-on-one. After Shun Mingfei was swapped away by the spatial swap, Sakura Keiko immediately followed up. A giant hand of ice and snow emerged from the snowy ground, grabbing Shun Mingfei and changing his direction, preventing him from falling into the space gate. At this moment, Shun Mingfei suddenly erupted, transforming into a 4-meter-tall beast man. At this moment, his speed was no less than that of a martial arts type of the same level, but his hands were like sharp claws, emitting a cold, chilling light. If he were to be scratched or swiped by him, even with a physique like Xiao Ran's, he would surely die. Xiao Ran sneered. Shun Mingfei looked tall and crude, but like Duan Chong, he had 800 tricks up his sleeve. Did he not know about his abilities? He had already allied with Oda Shiri. Would Oda Shiri not have told him about the existence of this variable himself in High City? Would it benefit Oda Shiri if Shun Mingfei died at his hands? Not in the slightest. On the contrary, it would be an act of aiding the enemy. But Shun Mingfei's acting was a bit over the top. The moment he came up, he so angrily asked who he was. This had already made Xiao Ran see that something was wrong. Sure enough, he came up and coordinated with Sakura Keiko. Hith. Xiao Ran didn't move, just used banishment on himself, letting Shun Mingfei's attack pass through his body. The space gate, meanwhile, took the opportunity to open, trying to collect Shun Mingfei again. But this time, Shun Mingfei was firmly on the ground. He immediately unleashed the strength and agility of a beast type, making a sudden stop and turn, grazing past the space gate. His speed was too fast, so fast that it was extremely difficult for Xiao Ran to capture, making it even harder to lock on. Sakura Ko also transformed into a 100-meter-tall giant and charged over. Ozawa Taro, on the other hand, pointed at Xiao Ran, muttering something, and then suddenly poked at the air from a distance. Xiao Ran had not yet deactivated banishment and was not in this spatial dimension at all. No matter how bizarre Ozawa Taro's curse was, it couldn't possibly affect him, having no effect at all. At this time, the 5 war generals also charged over together. Obviously, they wanted to combine their forces to kill Xiao Ran first, and then go help Otoshiri deal with Wu Shanglong. The previous times were at night, and they couldn't exert their full strength. But now it was daytime, completely different. Xiao Ran was calm and composed. The difference between night and day was just the thick fog. But in fact, Otoshiri's side had a wind-type ability user who had dispersed the fog during the battle. Therefore, now was not much different from the night. It was just that Otoshiri had been replaced by Shun Mingfei. But both were beast types, the difference being that Shun Mingfei couldn't fly. What a waste of his name. Xiao Ran complained internally while launching a full-scale counterattack. As soon as the space gate opened, a large number of attacks poured out. There were attacks launched by ability users that he had confiscated, as well as supersonic steel bars, rocks, and a large number of bullets. He didn't care about the details, just attacked. A chaotic battle broke out. Although Wu Shanglong's side had fewer people, with Xiao Ran's addition, his firepower alone was enough to make up for the gap in numbers and strength, making the battle extremely deadlocked. Otoshiri was burning with anxiety. His original intention was to fight a blitzkrieg and quickly finish off Wu Shanglong. He had never expected to be caught in such a protracted battle. If this dragged on, what if the other 3 major factions came to support? Then today would be the day the Black Dragon Society was annihilated. Don't think that the other 3 factions were suspicious now. They would definitely send scouts. After confirming the situation here, and with a chance to pick up a bargain, would the 3 factions just sit back and watch? If they destroyed the Black Dragon Society, they could feast on the spoils. Unable to win after a long battle, Otoshiri became more and more anxious. The longer it dragged on, the more dangerous he became. Retreat, he reluctantly gave the order. He never would have thought that a plan he had been plotting for so long would be foiled because of one person. It was this Chao Xining again. Damn it, where did this Chinese person come from? He shook off Wu Shanglong, then glared at Xiao Ran until Wu Shanglong charged back. Only then did he turn and retreat. Xiao Ran and Wu Shanglong pursued, but they stopped after a short chase. Their ability consumption was too great. They couldn't continue, otherwise if the 2 of them went deep alone, it was very likely they would be counterkilled. Although the ability users of the settlement were not very strong in combat, as long as they had abilities, they could play a role. For example, a martial arts type cooperating with a wind type ability user could greatly avoid being easily collected by Xiao Ran's space gate. This was a 1 + 1 is greater than 2 effect. Xiao Ran and Wu Shanglong looked at each other, both revealing heroic smiles. Fighting the Japs was just so invigorating. But thinking of Wong Tai's sacrifice, Wu Shanglong couldn't help but feel down again. The 2 returned to the camp. Next, of course, was to hold a funeral for Wong Tai, and then to rest. They had to restore their strength to its peak as soon as possible, otherwise it would be bad if someone came to attack at this time. Not long after, the leaders of the other 3 major factions in High City all came over with their men. The Jung-an settlement had just had a fight with the Japs, and Shun Mingfei had not only participated but had also played the role of the villain. This made the 3 major factions feel a strong sense of crisis. It was time for a meeting,